When freeloading just isn't hitting the spot anymore, 9 out of 10 doctors recommend Patreon. Benefits include early access to new videos, plus exclusive bonuses to scratch that itch while you're waiting for the next big drop.
While there are an array of qualities that may bring any crime or criminal into the public spotlight, there are very few things more prone to capture the public's imagination than a cold case. You might want to ascribe something noble to the attraction that many people seem to have with real-life murder mysteries. A yearning to see victims' lives honored and perpetrators brought to justice, for instance. But a more realistic, if not somewhat cynical explanation is that people just really love to know how a story ends, and when they're deprived of that, it drives them crazy. Today's story was one without an ending for the longest time, so long that when it was finally resolved in 2012, it was labeled in the press as the oldest solved cold case in American history. It starts on a snowy December evening in 1957 in the small town of Sycamore, Illinois, when a little girl named Maria Ridolph is let out to play with her friend Kathy Sigmund. The girls are playing on the street near Maria's house when around 6:30 p.m. they are approached by a young man wearing a colourful sweater. He was about average height, had blonde hair, a gap in his teeth, and went by the name Johnny. After introducing himself, Johnny asked if the girls liked dolls and piggyback rides. All of this is based off of Kathy Sigmund's account. She ran into her house to grab mittens while Johnny was giving Maria a piggyback ride. And that was the last time that anyone saw Maria Ridolph alive. The abduction of Maria Ridolph devastated the town of Sycamore and gained national attention, to the point that even FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover was asking for personal daily updates on the 7-year-old's disappearance. But in spite of an intense search and investigative effort, it seemed as if Maria Ridolph and the nefarious young man who called himself Johnny had disappeared into thin air, till about 5 months later, on April 26, 1958, when a couple that were hunting for mushrooms in a wooded area over 100 miles from Sycamore stumbled across a small, decomposed body, a body that would soon be confirmed as that of Maria Ridolph. The worst was now confirmed. And while losing a child in such a horrific manner could be said to be the worst thing a parent could possibly imagine going through, the one thing that could make such an ordeal even more tormenting still is having to live with the knowledge that the monster responsible for taking your baby's life and innocence is still out there. That is a burden that the parents of Maria Ridolph would take to their graves, as the authorities of the time and in the decades that followed would fail to apprehend the man who had taken their daughter. But that wasn't for a lack of trying. As stated, the investigation was intense and bolstered further by nationwide intrigue. In the days following her abduction, the police and FBI investigated hundreds of potential suspects, all of whom were cleared. One door they knocked on during that period was the Tessier residence on 227 Centre Cross Street, only a few doors down from where Maria was taken. The person of interest in the Tessier family certainly seemed to fit the bill. 18-year-old John Tessier, known to friends as Johnny, stood at 5 foot 11 inches tall, had blonde hair, and even a gap in his front teeth. But supposedly, logistics did not allow him to be the culprit. According to John Tessier's sisters, when police questioned his mother Eileen, she assured them that John was home all night. Besides that, the boy had no sort of history that would seem to be in line with that of a child abductor, and he was well known in the neighborhood where the episode had taken place. FBI agents took John Tessier off their suspect list after he passed a lie detector on the matter on December 10th. The very next day, he left home to join the military. And that was the last time that John Tessier's name was ever really spoken in the same breath as Maria Ridolph's. That is until 36 years later, in 1994, when Eileen Tessier was lying on her deathbed. Eileen called out to her daughter and John Tessier's half-sister, Janet. According to Janet Tessier, Eileen confided in her the following words: "Those 2 little girls and the one that disappeared, John did it. John did it, and you have to tell someone." And Janet did tell someone, yet it would still be a long time before the case was actually reopened. In the years that followed, Janet Tessier made numerous attempts to bring her mother's words to the attention of someone that might have the power to do something, but every time she was dismissed. This was in spite of the fact that she had more to offer than just the words of an elderly woman days from death's door. Though Janet was not old enough at the time of Maria's abduction to remember the event in her adult years, John's other two half-sisters, Jean and Catherine, were. They remembered hearing their mother tell the police that John was home all night, and the reason they remembered it so vividly was because they knew at the time it wasn't true. Truth be told, they had never been able to shake a suspicion that John was responsible, and their mother's dying words confirmed what had nagged at them for all those years. But when Janet contacted Sycamore police several times over a number of years by her account, the answer was always the same. John Tessier had been investigated and cleared at the time. The alleged words of a dying woman were not enough to bring charges, and the 36-year-old memories of her two daughters didn't do much to improve things. The Ridolph case remained as cold as could be. But finally, on September 11th of 2008, Janet Tessier sent an email to Illinois State Police, and for whatever reason, this time, something about what she was saying resonated with someone on the receiving end. That person was State Police Commander Tony Rapaz. He decided there was enough to her story to put two-star investigators, Larry Cott and Brian Hanley, on the case. And they uncovered quite a bit about John Tessier's past to suggest that this well could be a strong lead after all. First of all, he fit the bill of a child abductor much more clearly than when authorities first glanced at him when he was only 18 years old. His sister Jean alleged that he had molested her and other girls in the neighborhood when she was growing up. And Jean Tessier was not the only person investigators spoke to that could attest to John having sexual interest in young girls, including those in his own family. When they spoke to one of his ex-wives, Denise Trexler, she told them that she had discovered a naked photo of his 12-year-old daughter from another marriage taped to the bottom of a drawer in their house. The girl's name was Christine Marie Tessier. At the age of 34, she went missing before showing up dead about a month later, next to a drainage ditch on a local golf course. She was apparently last seen with her boyfriend, but no one has ever been charged with her murder. Investigators also came across a woman named Pamela Long, who had a particularly striking story to tell, given the circumstances of Maria's disappearance. Pamela grew up in the same neighborhood, and when she was around Maria's age, an older boy offered her a piggyback ride, which she accepted. Pamela's father, who was nearby, saw what was going on and immediately deemed it to be completely inappropriate. He ran over, pulled Pamela off of the boy's back, and strongly warned the teen not to approach his daughter again. The boy was known to the rest of the neighborhood to be strange, and the boy was John Tessier. There was no doubt about it. John Tessier had changed his name in the early 90s to Jack McCullough, taking his mother's maiden name and simply preferring Jack, and he now lived in Seattle, Washington. On June 29th of 2011, based on the discoveries we've just been over and more that we'll get into shortly, McCullough was brought in to Seattle Police Headquarters for questioning in relation to the disappearance of Maria Ridolph.
We've not been formally introduced. I'm Dave Zaleski.
Dave, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Brian. Brian, I'm an investigator, and Brian's with Illinois State Police. And
with who?
Illinois State Police.
Really?
Yeah. And what you probably remember a long time ago, back 50 years ago, a young girl was abducted.
I called that in. I called the FBI about that.
Okay. Back in December 3rd, 1957. Maria, exactly.
Yes.
And we've been going through and doing some new interviewing and new investigations regarding that.
Yeah, I'd be glad to help with that.
And you've been divorced 3 times?
You're investigating a child, right? You're not investigating me.
Right. This is a personal history form.
All right.
We fill this out for everybody.
All right.
Our command wants us. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I just do what I'm told.
Yeah. You know why I said you weren't from here?
Why is that?
You got a tan.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a joke. What do you call somebody in Seattle with a tan? Stranger.
One interesting quality of Jack McCullough's interrogation is that he will veer back and forth between completely cooperative and hostile or borderline hostile repeatedly. For what it's worth, he was brought into the room in cuffs, so he is likely not in two minds about whether or not he is under suspicion.
If you cannot afford a lawyer, one will be appointed to you free of cost before questioning if you wish. And you understand that.
That's all good advice. I'm on your side on this.
Okay.
I'm trying to help you.
Right. I mean, like I said,
We just
Yeah, right.
gotta follow the boss's rules.
yeah.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Because if the forms ain't filled out,
Yeah.
Okay, when are you going to get to the good part now?
We are done with my
Okay.
part.
I had a dream, and then it reminded me of a conversation I had as a kid. There's a little grade school that's only a block away from my home in Sycamore, which is 226. Oh, you want to write that down? The address in Sycamore?
Okay.
227 Center Cross Street. I was talking to a kid, and he said, "You see that guy over there?" I was probably 17, 18, 17. Anyway, and he said, "Stay away from that kid. He wants to talk about sex." Okay, so this kid. Now I'm going to have to reach back and remember his name. I think I wrote it to the FBI, but it bothered me enough where I called up, and he lived with two boys named Davies. Don Davies is one of them, and I don't remember the other one. But he was a kid they allowed to stay with them. He didn't have a home in Sycamore.
so he's like a foster kid kind of a thing.
And on the same block as Maria lived.
It can't be said for sure whether or not McCullough's story of tipping the FBI off to a boy who was said to like talking about sex and lived on the same block as Maria some 50-odd years after the fact when the memory miraculously came back to him in a dream is true. But no records from the FBI confirming this communication have ever come to light. The investigators continue to question McCullough about his family background and then bring him back to the day of December 3rd, 1957.
Now, I want to go back to and this to me is kind of a thing, it's kind of like, we all remember where we were when President Kennedy was shot or 9/11 happened, and this is kind of the 9/11 for Sycamore. I mean, anybody who we've talked to who's...
You're going to like this. Go ahead.
Yeah. So tell me kind of what you remember about that.
The day Maria was kidnapped, I was in the induction center in Chicago, joining the Air Force. I spent the entire day there, and they have a record of it minute by minute. I was really pissed. The FBI talked to me back then as a suspect, and they even interrogated me. And it's because the suspect that they think took Maria had a green coat, and I had a favorite green jacket at the time. So, I'm sure they asked the neighbors, anybody with a green jacket. And yeah, Jack's got one.
So so how did you wind up at the induction center?
I don't know how I got there. I may have taken the train, but I was there most of the day. And you can check with the FBI because they gave me a lie detector test. And I was disappointed in them, really, really disappointed, because I had an ironclad alibi of where I was. And they didn't even check. Didn't even make a phone call. I was very disappointed.
Well, let's go back and kind of walk me through, because they said you let's go to the day before, because you were going downtown or something. Tell me as much as you can remember about, in as much detail as you can remember.
Oh, you mean about downtown Chicago?
Yeah. How did you get downtown?
See, I don't remember. I mean, we're talking about many years ago. I know no family member was with me, so I don't think anybody drove me there, so I must have taken the train. And,
Now, did you have to purchase your own ticket? Did they give you a ticket?
don't know. Just don't remember it all. Is it important?
I appreciate the fact that we're talking about, over
No,
50
you're looking at me
years
as a
later.
suspect now. I don't like this.
Well, I'm as I told you, there's been some discrepancies in, interviews that we're having, and that's why I'm trying to find out what happened on the day and where you were on the day she disappeared.
I already told you.
Well, but
I
I
spent
want,
the entire day in Chicago that day.
McCullough's proposed alibi is that his activities around being enlisted into the military would have excluded him from being able to abduct Maria Rodolphin Sycamore at the time that she went missing. One part of his story is that on December 2nd, he travelled from the town of Rockford, where the military induction centre was located, to Chicago for a medical examination, and he had to stay overnight in Chicago for another examination in the morning on December 3rd, after which he did some sightseeing during the day. Note again that Maria was abducted in the early evening of December 3rd, sometime between 6:30 and 7 p.m.
when you got back in the evening, what did you do? This was a big day. I mean, this is a day that...
I probably crashed because it was a hard day.
So you think you were home asleep?
I'm assuming.
So why would people say you weren't there?
Who? What people?
Your sisters?
They don't know.
Oh, they say they do.
They don't know where I was back then.
Yeah, they do.
No.
When we start to look at the story that you tell here, okay, we've done a lot of interviews, there's things that just aren't right, okay? First of all, you had the nickname Johnny, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. So the person that was introduced themselves to the girls said he was Johnny, okay? Who knows? Okay. The description of the person matches you down to the gap in the teeth.
Yeah, that's really was surprising.
Yeah, well, I'm sure, but that's what they height, the weight.
See, but that was my neighborhood. Everybody knew me. So if they had seen me on the street, Maria's parents knew me. I used to play with their daughters in the backyard.
See, and that's the description isn't coming from Maria. It's coming from
she was
Kathy.
kidnapped.
Right. It's coming from Kathy, the other girl that was there. So she described somebody who looked remarkably like you and had the gap in the teeth, the same color hair.
See, I didn't hear anything about these descriptions. The only thing I heard was he had a green jacket.
Well, actually, it was a sweater that was the description.
All right, I don't have a green sweater. I had a jacket.
Well, and it wasn't a green sweater. It was a multicolored sweater.
See, it's not me.
Yeah, well, but your family says that you had a multicolored sweater that was just the same description, and that after Maria disappears, that sweater disappears.
Oh, this is bullshit.
You also told the FBI that you had some sex play with your sister.
Oh my God! I took a lie detector test.
We're talking about what you said.
Yeah, right.
Did you have sex with your sister?
And they said, and he said, when was this? I said, when we were little.
Okay. Now your sister says that it wasn't just when you were little.
So?
Well, so what I'm pointing out here is that if you say you told them the FBI the truth,
Yeah.
and you were little, and yet at the same time you're having sex with your sister.
I am not having sex with my sisters.
The indignation McCullough suddenly displays at the suggestion he had sex with his stepsisters speaks to how warped his conception of the parameters of normal behaviour seems to be. In this exchange, it appears as if McCullough is trying to qualify that he only engaged in some sort of limited sex play with his siblings, as opposed to full intercourse, and that it only happened when he was also very young, which given the age gap doesn't actually do much if anything to make the idea any less disturbing. Putting that aside, any remotely well-adjusted person understands that incestuous activity of any kind is extremely noxious and should be expected to express severe offence at the notion they've ever engaged in anything like it.
I'm just telling you what not just one, but multiple sisters have said.
Right.
Okay. They also say, well, actually, Dave Frederick says that he saw your car driving in the late afternoon in Sycamore.
So?
A good rule of thumb to keep in mind with Jack McCullough is that whenever he says the word so, it is almost certainly in response to a damning piece of information. The significance of McCullough's car being spotted driving through the neighbourhood at a time he claims he couldn't have been there is self-explanatory, and it's highly doubtful he's as oblivious to this as he's letting on.
Your mother also says to Janet and Mary that you killed her. Maria.
This is a lie. This is a lie. My mother loved me to death.
I know she did.
And
she
she was crying when the FBI wanted to talk to me.
I have no doubt, because she also told them some lies to the FBI.
My mother doesn't lie.
Well, she said you were home all night, and the girls sat right there and said, he couldn't be in. We looked, he wasn't home. The doors are all locked. Nobody can get in without us opening the door. And your mother didn't tell the FBI the truth. Now, she may have been protecting you, but
Protecting me by saying I murdered them? Murdered a girl?
I think that's what she was thinking that you did here. And I think
No, this is bullshit. It's all bullshit. My mother wouldn't say that.
your mother did say that.
She didn't.
The other problem is that you're given a ticket by the military to go downtown. Right?
Sure.
Okay. So it doesn't make any sense not to take the ticket.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The problem is that the ticket didn't get used.
This is a key piece of discovery that helped investigators unravel McCullough's alibi. When combing through his past, they interviewed a woman named Jan Edwards, who McCullough was dating at the time of Maria Ridolf's disappearance. They asked Edwards to rifle through any and all mementos she had from the time, just in case something of use materialized. One thing she had in her possession was an old high school photo of John Tessier in a cardboard frame. Concealed within that frame was this train ticket. It is a one-way ticket from Rockford to Chicago, and what caught the attention of investigators is that it was not punched. The reason this is so significant is that if John Tessier did not need a train to travel from Rockford to Chicago, then he must have had access to a different mode of transportation, i.e. his car. And if he had his car on December 3rd, it would make it much more plausible for him to have been able to perform his military-related activities during the day, while still having plenty of time to make it to Sycamore within the window of Maria Ridolf's abduction.
Yeah, I mean, you know how the military is. Here's your ticket to go from Rockford to Chicago. You never used it. You know where this comes from? Jan Edwards. You know how women are sentimental, they keep everything.
Yeah.
She's got pictures of you, and she said, yeah, John gave me this.
That's really funny.
Well, I think it's not funny. I think it questions whether or not you were involved in this.
Okay, I'm going to tell you, I'm not involved. You can give me a lie detector test, I'll pass it.
Okay, all right. Why don't we do that right now?
All right.
And that's exactly what they set to doing. Zaleski goes to get a polygraph set up, while McCullough bores Agent Hanley with tips about the weird kid from the neighborhood who was purported to like talking about sex.
He was weird. And
How do you know that?
this kid told me, and I observed.
Okay. So you don't know that firsthand,
I
that
don't
he's
know.
weird? Like, what's weird?
Not normal.
Regular viewers of this channel will know that we don't take polygraphs seriously around here, but just because the device is useless insofar as being a lie detector doesn't mean people's behaviour when sitting next to it isn't sometimes interesting to observe, and Jack McCullough is a very good example of this.
This is the second polygraph I've taken on this. First one was by the FBI, and I passed it.
When was that?
It was in 1957, I believe.
Okay.
And I'm going to pass this one as well, as long as you stay on the subject of the little girl and her murder.
Well, quite frankly, Jack, there's some questions
I know there's some questions you have to
ask
ask
you.
for verification. I understand why.
Well, actually, I'm going to ask you some questions about the details of your personal life.
May I
And some of them,
stop answering?
This is a point of contention that will colour the entirety of McCullough's polygraph exam. His stance is that he's happy to submit to a polygraph, but only on the condition that the only questions he's asked are those pertaining to the abduction of Maria Ridolf. So questions pertaining to anything else, like incestuous experimentation in childhood for instance, are out of bounds. The problem with this from a polygrapher's perspective is that this is as good as not being willing to take a test at all, as the test is supposed to work by gauging your reactions to uncomfortable questions that are not related to what you're being investigated for, and comparing those to your reactions to questions that are.
well, here, just hear me out, okay?
Right.
Really, we're not so much interested in that, but I need to ask you some detailed personal things about your life. Some of it can be pretty sensitive, but I need them in order to structure your question. It really is in your best benefit to answer them. in order for this thing to work.
I understand you have to make a verification, and you have to set your machine up. I understand. But you've read me right, my rights.
Mm-hmm.
And my rights are, I don't have to say anything if I don't want to.
Right.
And so
But
if I don't answer you...
But it's not going to be pertaining to what you're allegedly accused of. I'm going to ask you some questions about your personal history and so on and so forth that might make you, that are a little bit sensitive.
Then we're done.
Well, why don't we just go ahead with the interview and see if you don't like them.
All right.
Okay?
All right.
And what is this little girl's name?
Maria Ridolph.
Okay.
And she was a lovely little girl. She was a little Mexican girl about this high.
With a last name like, what did you say?
Ridolph.
Okay.
I think the mother was Mexican, the father was...
Oh, so she was biracial. And
Yeah.
they make the most beautiful kids.
Oh man, she was just an adorable little girl. Great big brown eyes, and everybody in the neighborhood loved her.
The polygraph technician, Irene Lau, would later say that whenever McCullough talked about Maria, he exhibited a degree of affection that seemed off, and this was a specific moment she cited. It's not abnormal to remark about a child being adorable, but when McCullough talks about Maria's big brown eyes, the body language he exhibits is reminiscent of someone going into some kind of trance-like state.
So basically, you're telling me that you have absolutely no knowledge of this.
Absolutely.
You have no knowledge about Maria's abduction.
I have no knowledge of her abduction other than what I was told.
You did not stop and talk and play with Maria.
Oh no! She was a child.
Or Kathy.
No.
Well, so what?
No.
And kids play with other kids.
Yeah. I was 17 years old. She was just talking.
How old were you when you lost your virginity?
I was 20.
20? Wow.
Yep.
Who with?
With an older woman down in South Carolina after I joined the Air Force.
Have you ever had sex with a male?
I haven't had sex with a male.
Have you had sexual contact with a male?
We're done with that.
I take that as an
Okay, we're done.
with that particular question.
Yes.
Okay. Why? I mean, really sensitive
What's it
about
got to do with the little girl?
I'm trying to ask questions to help structure your test. It has no bearing on crimes, this, that, or the other thing. I'm trying to help you as best I can.
You're not helping me.
You ever been arrested before?
No.
You've been in trouble with the law before?
I had one problem with the law.
What happened?
Next question.
Oh, come on. You can tell me.
I'm glad you're my friend.
You think I'm going to tell these guys?
Yes.
Why would I do that? There's no bearing on this case.
Very good, then move on.
Come on. I need to be able to structure your
You
test.
don't need to do this. Next question.
Have you committed any crimes that you haven't been caught for?
No.
Then you shouldn't have any problems with the other question, right?
No. Next question.
So you don't want to answer that question, even though it's the same as the
It
other.
doesn't matter. I have a right to not answer questions. I'm not answering that question. We're trying to solve a murder.
That's right, we are.
Yes, we are.
I'm not asking these questions for love. If you tell me yes or no and tell me truthfully, I won't go any further than that. Can you answer truthfully, yes or no, you've never committed a crime that you haven't been caught before?
Correct.
Yes or no?
Yes or no what? What's the
Have
question?
you ever committed a crime that you haven't been caught?
If I haven't committed a crime, I haven't been caught. I have never committed a crime. I haven't been caught.
Yes or no?
I answered the question.
That's how I'm going to ask it. You cannot answer it like that. It's going to be yes or no.
I can't. What is a yes or no answer? Yes what? What does yes mean? Yes means
So
I've
you're
committed-
saying yes, you have committed
No. I said, what does yes mean? I'm asking a question.
Because McCullough makes it clear he will not engage with control questions, in addition to being reticent to providing straight yes or no answers that the polygraph requires, it's quite clear that whatever chart his exam yields will be even more useless than a standard polygraph test, if such a thing is even possible. Regardless, Agent Lau eventually attempts to conduct an exam in earnest.
Is your correct name Jack McCullough?
It is.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Do you intend to answer all of my questions truthfully?
Well, I intend to answer questions truthfully. Maybe not all.
I need a yes or no.
No.
So you are not going to answer all my questions truthfully.
Remember my rights again. If you ask a question I don't want to answer, you're not going to get an answer.
But just hear me out. Just listen to the questions first, okay, before you start objecting. Okay? Do you intend to answer all of my questions truthfully?
Okay.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Were you born in Belfast?
Yes.
Are you hoping I will make a mistake on this test?
No.
What is 3 plus 3 minus 2?
4.
Okay, don't say just give me one word response, okay? Have you taken any drugs, alcohol? Let me finish reading the question. Okay?
All right.
Have you taken any drugs, alcohol, or medication you haven't told me about?
No.
Are you planning to try to manipulate this test?
No.
Have you researched any information about polygraph before coming here today?
No.
Instead of test questions, I'm only going to ask you once, okay? But I won't go by it nearly as fast as I just read it, because after every question, I'm going to wait for a certain amount of time to elapse to chart your reactions. Regarding whether or not you killed Maria on December 3rd, 1957, do you intend to answer truthfully each question about that?
Absolutely.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Did you kill Maria?
No.
Let me finish reading the question.
All right, son.
Did you kill Maria on December 3rd, 1957? And when I say kill Maria, that includes everything that went into this thing.
I love Maria. I would not kill her.
The abduction, the sexual assault, the taking her away from that area, discarding her body.
Go ahead. I'm good for it.
That's what it covers.
Yeah.
Okay? You understand that?
Finally.
Okay. So I'll ask you again, did you kill Maria on December 3rd, 1957?
No.
With all the things that it entails?
Correct.
Abducting her, dumping her body, sexually assaulting her, killing her?
No.
Okay. On December 3rd, 1957, did you kill Maria?
No.
During the first 30 years of your life, do you remember ever having sexual contact with your sisters? And that means fondling, kissing, rubbing, penetration of any kind, whether it's digital or with your penis.
I'm not going to answer that question. It's none of your business, and it has nothing to do with Maria.
It does.
It doesn't.
It does.
Sorry.
Without the ability to gauge McCullough's reaction to control questions, his responses to the relevant questions will not be analysable, and so the polygraph is aborted, and Jack McCullough is taken back to the interrogation room.
So that didn't go too good, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's all right.
Are you going to arrest me?
Quite honestly, I haven't made a decision yet, because I've got some issues with this that I can't resolve without you.
Okay.
And so, what I wanted to do was, have you again kind of think through, because again, I appreciate the fact that we're talking a long time ago, okay? And, if we can come up with, alternatives.
Okay, you haven't got shit, or the FBI would have arrested me. I'm done talking to you.
Well, that makes my evening short then, doesn't it?
Yep.
Okay. Well, is he free to go?
No.
Okay. So,
Did you say no?
I said no.
Okay.
No.
Yes.
Did you do any research on me after you found out who I was?
I don't know who you are.
you know who I am.
I know you're Mike Straczynski.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's what I know.
No, I'm a cold case detective, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Detective Mike Straczynski spends some time questioning McCullough, who again insists that he will not discuss anything that is not directly related to Maria Ridolph's abduction, and also continues to push the weird sex talk kid lead.
You got to realize, you're kind of like in a world of shit right now, okay? And you're going to have to give up the truth, okay? To save your own ass, to be smart, okay? So just listen to this, what I'm asking, all right? There's certain things that happen here that I know happened, you know happened here. Once again, I'm not saying, from reviewing this file, I'm not saying here that you killed that girl. Okay?
I did not.
I'm not saying you did, okay?
That's what I'm investigating for, right?
That's exactly what you're being investigated for.
All right.
Okay? I really think that one of the problems with what happened here is I believe, from reading all the reports that I did, from the interview with that other little girl who was there, okay, there was 2 girls there.
I don't know anything about a second.
Okay, yeah, well, there were 2 girls out there. There were 2 girls out there, and they were playing out there when I believe that you came up there.
What?
Now listen to me, and then you're going to ask me the questions. And once again, I'm not saying that you killed anybody. You understand me?
Oh, man.
Okay. So, anyway, yeah, there was another girl there also. And that you probably did. Maybe I'll refresh
Was
your
she
memory.
kidnapped too?
No, she wasn't.
How old is she?
She was the same age. They were best friends.
Oh, really?
Yeah, best friends.
Okay.
And she's still alive today. And actually, I think you met the two detectives that were here. Actually, they interviewed her.
Yeah.
Okay. And once again, I'm saying this is where I believe that you're hiding something. Okay. And I'll tell you why I think you're hiding something.
I'm going to tell you you're wrong right now.
Okay, well, you better hear what I say first before you say I'm wrong, okay? What I believe kind of happened here is I believe that you did go out there. And that's fine. Just let me, then you can answer some questions. So these two girls were out there, and they knew that the guy, and they knew his Johnny. And Johnny said, and he was very nice to the girl. He knew Maria, and he offered them a piggyback ride. And I believe that what happened is that person was you. And
oh my God!
And they did give you a piggyback ride, but that girl didn't say you killed her. You understand that?
McCullough again argues he has a rock-solid alibi, and Szynski continues to probe for specifics that can be offered, as well as trying to get McCullough to engage in further discussion of his relationship with his family.
Your mom, who's deceased now.
Yeah.
Okay. You were real tight with her.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Like you were from once again.
I called my mom every month of my life. I loved my mom to death, and my mom was brilliant. When she died, my dad was asked, "How many people do you think are going to come to the funeral?" And Dad says, "Oh, maybe 30 to 40." 350 people showed up.
Did you show up?
No, I was in the service.
They wouldn't let you get home from military leave for your mom's funeral? Were you in Vietnam then?
I don't remember where I was.
Because Eileen Tessier passed in 1994, it's safe to say that McCullough was not stationed in Vietnam. His sisters have been clear that they explicitly told him he was not welcome at the funeral.
Now, I told you there was two little girls there. One girl got killed, and the other little girl. She said the person who came there, who said his name was Johnny, who lived nearby, and gave him a piggyback ride. They said he was very nice, and they said he was one of these guys here, and her name's, and she signed her name on the bottom of that photograph. Can you picture anybody out here that you know this photograph?
I don't know any of these guys, and I don't think any of these guys are from Sycamore.
The photo third from the left is the man that Kathy Sigmund positively identified as Johnny. It is John Tessier. Jack McCullough has just claimed to not be able to recognize a photo of himself.
Just take a look at every picture and turn it over to definitely start with one and just look at it and just...
No, these guys aren't from Sycamore.
Who do you think this guy looks like?
I don't know.
You know what that guy looks like?
He might look like me, but he's too feminine looking.
That's you from a wedding picture. Obviously that's Xerox. It's a Xerox picture. That was you. It's a little whited out right there. That's you from a wedding picture that was put into this montage that the girl said it was Johnny that gave the girl the piggyback ride. Once again, she didn't say you killed him, but that's what they're saying. Number two, listen to this part. Number two, okay? Jack, look at me. Number two, okay? You know why this other case got other information we received? This is all documented, this other information that we received. Know who said that? Know who told us that you did this? Someone who I think is from all the information I read, is a very smart person, a very intelligent person, and someone who had lived with a bunch of guilt for a long time before she passed away.
Yeah, you're going to say my mom, that's bullshit.
No. Why do you say it's bullshit?
Because she wouldn't suspect me of murder, and she knew where I was.
I'm telling you exactly. I'll show you the documentation that said that she said that you're the one who did this, and that she said she was ashamed of it. And getting back to this is that other little girl who said, this is her signature right down here. Once again, this is Xerox. I said, Jack, once again, I still think you're covering for somebody. I think somebody did something there. I think you were there when not when the girl got killed, but I think you were there when the girl got the piggyback ride. I'm not saying you took the girl and killed. I'm saying you were there, and then you walked off, or somebody else came up there, and you remembered this, and you're trying to hide this or cover for somebody, and I don't know who you're trying to cover for. If it's one of these other,
I'm not covering for anybody, and I don't know what you're talking about.
Whatever else you might want to say about Jack McCullough, he is not a stupid man, and he never comes close to embracing the alternative question Detective Szynski attempts to put in front of him, of being responsible for Maria Ridolf's piggyback ride, but not her abduction and murder. Over the course of the next half hour, Detective Szynski continues to confront McCullough with Sigmund's positive identification, his history of sex abuse allegations, his unused train ticket, and his mother's deathbed confession. But this mounting pile of circumstantial evidence will not prove to be enough for him to relent and offer a confession. It was, however, plenty for the judge that ultimately presided over his trial. On September 14th, 2012, 55 years after Maria's life was taken, Jack McCullough was convicted of the crime. He was handed a life sentence without the possibility of parole for 20 years, at which point he would be 93 years old. It must have been somewhat of a bittersweet moment for the living members of Maria's family and the Tessier sisters as they stood on the courthouse steps after McCullough's fate was decided. On one hand, the man who had tormented their minds for so long was finally being held accountable. But on the other, nothing could take back the evil things he had done, or the fact that he had gotten away with it for so long. All the same, even though his being brought to justice was long overdue, Jack McCullough's case does have a silver lining to it. A message to any victim who ever feels like giving up hope, or monster who thinks they've well and truly run out the clock. Justice doesn't have an expiry date. And even if it feels like 1,000,000 people have turned their back on you, that doesn't mean the next one will. Whenever you make that next phone call, or send off that next email, you never know who will be on the other end of it. It may just be that one person who will finally set things right. There's just one problem. Jack McCullough was totally innocent. Now bear in mind, people are seldom found innocent, as opposed to not guilty. Usually, acquittals come down to a judge or jury determining there is an insufficient level of proof to justify conviction, but you can't necessarily take that as a proclamation the person on trial did not commit the crime. This is not the case with Jack McCullough. Jack McCullough positively did not murder Maria Ridolph. He couldn't have, just like he said in his interrogation. Why that is boils down to two facts. 1. John Tessier placed a collect call from a post office in Rockford to Sycamore at 6:57 p.m. on December 3rd. 2. Maria Ridolph's abduction in Sycamore is firmly established to have taken place between 6:30 and 7 p.m. on December 3rd. Before breaking down why these facts categorically rule John Tessier out, let's establish why they are facts, not just well-founded opinions. When the FBI initially investigated John Tessier, he mentioned the collect call when giving his alibi. The FBI did their due diligence in following up on this, and the resulting paperwork of that investigation is publicly available to this day. They spoke to the general manager of the Sycamore Ogle Telephone Company, who was able to confirm that a collect call was in fact placed by a John S. Tessier to the home of Ralph E. Tessier in Sycamore at 6:57 p.m., and the call was placed from the phone number 2-9297. That level of detail might seem a bit excessive, but you'll get why we're making note of it in a moment. Before that though, a bit of an explainer on the time frame of Maria's abduction, because there is some contention around this, even though, as you'll hopefully agree very soon, there really shouldn't be. The FBI established Maria's abduction as taking place between 6:45 and 7 p.m. That time frame was based off of multiple accounts from neighbors, as well as Maria's own family, most importantly, her father Michael. Now granted, memory is malleable, especially in the midst of crisis, but not all memories are equal, and you can be a lot more confident in the time someone places a recent memory if they are basing that time off of a connection to something specific. Maria's brother, mother, and father all told the FBI that she came into the house to get her doll after 6:30. Her father Michael said he wasn't able to place the exact time because he was preoccupied by a television show he was watching, the Western series Cheyenne, which aired at 6:30. When Larry Cott was reinvestigating the case, he knew the FBI timeline, coupled with John Tessier's phone call, was a big problem, an insurmountable one in fact. We can see this in the way he bent over backward to create a new timeline that could place Maria's abduction significantly earlier than 6:30, let alone 6:45. What Cott essentially did was write off all eyewitness accounts that placed Maria's abduction in the time frame the FBI established as wrong, and then combed through interviews to find anyone who could be read as placing it earlier. One account he found was from an oil delivery man named Tom Brady, who by his estimation saw the girls playing when he was making a delivery around 6:15 p.m. Cott cross-referenced this with a bus driver who drove past the corner where the girls were playing at about 6:30 p.m. and claimed to have not seen them. There's absolutely no reason to disbelieve the bus driver's account and the time he placed it, but it doesn't do much if anything to help move the timeline back, because the bus driver would have no reason to be keeping an eye out for two little girls playing on the street, so it's entirely plausible they were there and he just didn't make note of them. That you would put more credence in the bus driver than Maria Ridolf's own family, coupled with several other neighbours, is inexplicable, unless of course your only goal was to move the timeline to implicate McCullough. Larry Cott ultimately concluded Maria was abducted no later than 6:20 p.m. He also reasoned just because McCullough could prove he placed a call from Rockford at 6:57 p.m. didn't mean he could prove from where within Rockford the call was placed. If he abducted Maria Ridolf on the street corner in Sycamore at 6:20 p.m., or even a little earlier, and placed the call from the outskirts of town in Rockford, he would have even more of a window to make the commute. This is another illustration of how much tunnel vision Larry Cott was operating under. Remember, it wasn't established as being merely a phone booth somewhere in Rockford. The manager at the phone company confirmed it as being from a specific number, 2-9297. And that specific number can be traced to the area in Rockford that John Tessier claimed he placed the call from at the time. With all of this in mind, let's take a look at the sort of commute we're talking about, and you should quickly get an idea of why investigators were trying to buy every minute they could to make this work. Here is a Google Maps route from the corner Maria was taken from to the outskirts of Rockford. So we're actually going with Larry Cott's hypothesis to start with, even though it's not credible. Now bear in mind, this is far from a precise picture of what the situation would have been in 1957, but all the differences you need to factor in add time to Tessier's best case scenario commute. The roads were different. He would have been driving in snowy conditions and using a car from the 50s. But going with this modern projection that doesn't take any of those factors into account, Google's quickest route is still a 31-minute drive covering 24 miles. So even if you allow that Maria was taken at 6:20 p.m., which there really is no reason to, and that John Tessier placed the call from the outskirts of town, which he didn't, and you don't take any of the variables we just mentioned into account, which you absolutely should, still, even then, the only way John Tessier's alibi doesn't still cover him in Larry Cott's scenario is that perhaps his abducting Maria Ridolf would not literally break the laws of time and space. He would have less than 10 minutes to spare from the time he ran off with Maria to arriving at the phone booth. A feat that, while maybe not literally impossible, is so far-fetched that it should be discounted by any reasonable person. Then when you place Maria Ridolf's abduction where it actually was, and you put John Tessier in the actual area we know he was when he made that phone call, you still don't even need to take the roads, conditions and car into account before you find the scenario is going that extra mile and breaking the laws of time and space. There is simply no way it could have happened. So you might now be wondering, how did Jack McCullough get convicted? The FBI files were ruled inadmissible. Yeah, ain't that a hoot? Kind of hard defending yourself when the key piece of evidence exonerating you is off the table. As you would imagine, there was an appeals process, and it resulted in the vacating of McCullough's conviction on April 15th of 2016, once the FBI files were taken into account. And a little less than a year after that, he was issued a certificate of innocence, categorically clearing his name in the eyes of the law. So, sorry for essentially lying to you for over 45 minutes. But it wasn't done to waste your time. It was to illustrate a point that's always worth keeping in mind whenever you open a newspaper or turn on the television. There's always more than one way to tell a story, and the way this story was told for most of the video's duration was very much in line with how it was being told by the mainstream press while everything was unfolding at the time. And it's not as if McCullough's recorded alibi wasn't known of during that period. He and his family were screaming about it to anyone who would listen. He even explicitly made the point about the phone call during part of the interrogation we deliberately fought through.
If I made a phone call from Rockford, which you got...
I know right where it's at, yeah.
And at 7 o'clock, Sycamore is 30 miles away from Rockford.
But just like it didn't suit the investigator's case, nor did it suit the story most of the media wanted to tell. The coldest case ever solved is just a much more enticing headline than a half-century later, one more dead end. And you can make that first headline work even without the facts on your side, so long as you're in charge of telling the story. Just choose what to leave in, what to leave out, what to emphasize, and what to brush over. When given subjective behavioral cues, interpret them as uncharitably as possible. Whenever something comes up that looks good, pick as many holes in it as you can. Whenever something comes up that looks bad, leave it hanging. And to be clear, there are plenty of things in this case that really did look very bad for Jack McCullough, matching Kathy Sigmund's physical description, her eventual positive identification of him, his history of sex abuse allegations, more than we even had time to get into, by the way, the mysteriously unused train ticket, the creepy piggyback ride incident with Pamela Long, the strange disappearance of his adult daughter, though to be fair, there's no evidence linking him to that incident either, and his mother's deathbed confession, according to the account of his estranged sister who openly despises him. All of these things look bad. Terrible, in fact, and this video isn't striving to argue that Jack McCullough is a really nice guy, but he did not kill Maria Ridolph, because no amount of things that look bad can ever trump the cold, hard constraints of reality. And it's for that reason that, unfortunately, Maria Ridolph's story remains one without an ending. "'Twas the day after Christmas the new Marcus video released with a bash, along with a pitch for Patreon to try and raise some cash. You get feature videos early, the shameless plug appealed, along with occasional bonuses while you're waiting for the next proper meal?" Yes, that was good enough. This might just wind up being the most frustrating video you will ever watch. If you're already familiar with the case of JonBenet Ramsey, you'll likely know why such a disclaimer is being made up front. If you're not, well, brace yourself, because you're about to become one of the countless people who have gone back and forth over and over on what the most likely explanation is for what really happened in the hours leading up to a 6-year-old girl's lifeless body being discovered in her own home. The debate over what really happened is one that has raged on various online forums for 25 years now, and it's not a question that this video has any pretense of settling once and for all. What it does seek to do is serve as a standalone piece that provides a sampling of some of the most popular schools of thought on the case, along with key pieces of evidence proponents of said schools of thought point to as supporting their conclusions. One thing this channel has developed somewhat of a reputation for is holding back certain views of a case for the purpose of a big reveal. While in a sense, the Ramsey case is a perfect candidate for such an approach, there are so many twists and turns in it that if we leaned too heavily into that aspect, the channel would risk becoming a parody of itself. So as a change of pace, we're starting out today by telling you exactly what's about to be presented, and in what order. There are many acronyms used when discussing the Ramsey case, but for this video you only need to know 3. RDI, standing for Ramses did it. BDI, standing for Berg, JonBenet's 9-year-old brother did it. And IDI, Intruder did it. There are all sorts of variations on exactly what transpired within those core theories, but we won't get too lost in the weeds with that. This video will spend most of its time examining reasons why people suspect a family member or an outsider is responsible. The answer as to why they did it and how exactly it came about is such speculative territory that it's best to leave that up to the imagination of any given viewer. So to start, we'll lay out the timeline of events in the evening and morning prior to JonBenet's body being discovered. Then we'll look at some events and case evidence following that discovery through the prism of RDI. RDI for the purpose of this video is simply the stance that one or both of the parents were involved. We will present one theory involving just the mother and another just the father, but ultimately this video does not have a position on whether any one parent acting alone is more or less plausible than them acting together, or if it was one parent acting alone, which parent it's more likely to be. Naturally, we'll look at BDI after that, which is completely self-explanatory. And then we'll go into IDI, which after sitting through an absolute torrent of information that makes the Ramseys look bad, will probably feel like a reach. However, if you are familiar with the case, but only through seeing coverage of it in passing, you may be surprised by how much the intruder theory actually has going for it. Or maybe not. The Ramsey case has an impressive ability of making a lot of people very stubborn. After that, obviously we'll wrap up and you can decide which camp you belong in, whether you need to read into things further before making up your mind, or if all you really want to do is curl up on the floor in the fetal position and weep. When dealing with a case that involves so much that is not known for sure, it is probably best to begin by outlining what we do know for sure. On Christmas evening of 1996, sometime between 9 and 10 p.m. or so, John and Patsy Ramsey and their two young children, 9-year-old Burke and 6-year-old Jean-Benet, arrive at their Boulder, Colorado home after attending a Christmas party at the house of close friends Fleet and Priscilla White. According to John and Patsy, Jean-Benet had fallen asleep in the car and was taken to bed by John. Even that seemingly innocuous detail is questioned by some. It's not a factual assertion we will spend any time on right now. We only pause to note how these sorts of disputes in the Ramsey case really do illustrate just how little is known for sure. Whatever the Ramseys' specific before-bedtime activities were, if in fact they were all in their beds at one point that night, the next thing we unfortunately know for sure is that sometime that evening, or in the early morning hours of the following morning, Jean-Benet was killed. We do not know for sure whether Patsy or anyone else in the family was aware of that fact when she made the following 911 call at 5:52 a.m.
911 emergency. What's going on there, ma'am?
We have a kidnapping. Hurry, please.
Explain to me what's going on, okay?
There's a note left and our daughter's gone.
A note was left and your daughter is gone? How old is your daughter?
She's blonde. 6 years old.
How long ago was this?
I don't know. I just found the note. And my daughter's
Does it say who took her?
What?
Does it say who took her?
I don't know. There's a ransom note here.
It's a ransom note?
It says SBTC. Victory. Please.
Okay, what's your name? Are you
Patsy Ramsey. I'm the mother. Oh my God. Please.
I'm sending an officer over, okay?
Please.
Do you know how long she's been gone?
No, I don't. Please, we just got out. Is she right here? Oh my God, please.
Okay, well, I am, honey.
Please.
Take a deep breath,
Please.
okay?
Hurry.
Patsy.
Mere minutes after that call, Officer Rick French is the first to arrive at what will become one of the most infamous crime scenes of the 20th century. John Ramsey informs Officer French of their daughter's apparent kidnapping and directs him to the ransom note Patsy made reference to in her 911 call. The 2.5-page note is spread out on the floor just west of the kitchen area. Officer French is told that Patsy originally found it at the bottom of a nearby spiral staircase. It reads as follows.
Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. We respect your business, but not the country that it serves. At this time, we have your daughter in our possession. She is safe and unharmed, and if you want her to see 1997, you must follow our instructions to the letter. You will withdraw $118,000 from your account. $100,000 will be in $100 bills, and the remaining $18,000 in $20 bills. Make sure that you bring an adequate size attaché to the bank. When you get home, you will put the money in a brown paper bag. I will call you between 8 and 10 a.m. tomorrow to instruct you on delivery. The delivery will be exhausting, so I advise you to be rested. If we monitor you getting the money early, we might call you early to arrange an earlier delivery of the money and hence an earlier pickup of your daughter. Any deviation of my instructions will result in the immediate execution of your daughter. You will also be denied her remains for proper burial. The two gentlemen watching over your daughter do not particularly like you, so I advise you not to provoke them. Speaking to anyone about your situation, such as police, FBI, etc., will result in your daughter being beheaded. If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies. If you alert bank authorities, she dies. If the money is in any way marked or tampered with, she dies. You will be scanned for electronic devices, and if any are found, she dies. You can try to deceive us, but be warned that we are familiar with law enforcement countermeasures and tactics. You stand a 99% chance of killing your daughter if you try to outsmart us. Follow our instructions and you stand a 100% chance of getting her back. You and your family are under constant scrutiny as well as the authorities. Don't try to grow a brain, John. You are not the only fat cat around, so don't think that killing will be difficult. Don't underestimate us, John. Use that good southern common sense of yours. It is up to you now, John. Victory! SBTC.
The note is remarkable for innumerable reasons, not least of which are its length and cinematic tone, qualities you've likely already noticed, even if you didn't have any previous familiarity with the case. We'll look a little more closely at some of its most notable peculiarities later, but for now, we will continue to stick with just the factual timeline. A cursory inspection of the house yields no sign of forced entry or struggle. John Ramsey informs Officer French that the doors to the house appeared to have been locked, just as they had been prior to Jean Benet's apparent kidnapping. They had an alarm system, but it was seldom activated, and this night was no exception. Neither he or Patsy had heard screams or any other notable sounds during the night, and upon discovering the note, he had checked Burke's room and confirmed that his son was still present, safe, and sound asleep. At no point had his parents awakened him. Sergeant Paul Reichenbach is the second officer to arrive on scene at 6:10 a.m. According to police reports, Officer French told Reichenbach that something about the scene did not seem right. Reichenbach calls for the assistance of on-call detective supervisor Sergeant Robert Whitson, as well as victims' advocates. He also takes steps to have the Ramseys' phone lines monitored so that any incoming call from the kidnappers can be traced back to their source of origin. Around the time of Reichenbach's arrival, Ramsey family friends John and Barbara Fernie, as well as Fleet and Priscilla White, arrive on scene. Patsy Ramsey had called them shortly after she ended her 911 call. Fleet White decides to do a quick search of the house, including the basement, just in case Jean Benet may be hiding. An extremely remote possibility given the note, but you can hardly fault a person for trying to remain optimistic in such a horrific situation. In the basement, White notices a window is broken. John Ramsey will later disclose that was his doing. He locked himself out of the house months ago and broke in via that window. He never got around to having the glass replaced. Fleet White approached a door fastened with a makeshift wooden latch that led to another room in the basement, the Ramseys' wine cellar. He found it very difficult to see anything in the dark room, including the light switch right next to the doorway. He determined the room to be empty and headed back upstairs. At Fleet White's suggestion, Burke Ramsey is awoken around 7 a.m. and told that he will be going to the Whites' house for the day. He is in a car en route to their West Boulder residence very shortly thereafter. The Reverend of the Ramseys' Church, Roland Hoverstock, arrives on scene at 7:13 a.m., joining victims' advocates' efforts to comfort John and Patsy. You may have noted at this point that the crime scene is becoming awfully crowded. In addition to letting multiple people with no connection to law enforcement into an active crime scene, no areas of the house, with the exception of Jean Benet's bedroom, were ever warded off, allowing the Ramseys and their associates to move about the residence as they pleased and potentially contaminate evidence. This will not be the last break from investigative protocol. At approximately 8:10 a.m., detectives Fred Patterson and Linda Arndt arrive on scene. Detective Arndt speaks to John Ramsey and gets his permission to put a recording device on his telephone in the den, which he is to answer all incoming calls on. Arndt then speaks to Patsy Ramsey, who is being consoled by friends. Arndt reported Patsy to sometimes look as if she was staring off into the distance, appearing vacant and dazed. Patsy gives Arndt a brief statement on the morning's events. Somewhere around this time, victims' advocates and Ramsey friends do some tidying in the kitchen, including wiping down tabletops after making use of the area, potentially contaminating evidence. Sergeant Robert Whitson arrives on scene sometime around 9:15 a.m. and asks John for handwriting samples from both him and Patsy as part of standard procedure. John readily provides them in the form of 2 notepads that he and Patsy frequently write in. The phone rang multiple times between the hours of 8 and 10 a.m., but in no instance was the call in regard to the ransom. According to Arndt's report, she never heard anyone, including the Ramseys, make any comment about the fact that the ransom call had not come through by 10 a.m., the latest hour specified in the note. By about 10:35 a.m., all victims' advocates and police personnel except Detective Arndt have left the premises, leaving Arndt alone to monitor and control the movement of multiple civilians within the house. Detective Arndt observed a range of emotional states from John Ramsey that morning. At times he was able to converse fluently and even smile and joke. At other times he was sobbing and not even able to speak. Conversely, Patsy Ramsey was in a persistent state of anguish, on more than one occasion asking aloud through tears why she was not able to hear her baby. Sometime between 12:30 and 1 p.m, Detective Arndt is observing signs of anxiety in John Ramsey and tells Fleet White that she needs help keeping his mind occupied. She encourages the two to search the house from top to bottom, excluding Jean-Benet's bedroom, to see if anything belonging to Jean-Benet had been taken or left behind. This was a particularly egregious break from protocol. No civilian, but especially a parent, should have been able to search the house without police supervision, let alone instructed to. John Ramsey makes his way to the basement, with White in tow. Once in the basement, they search the main area with the broken window. John makes his way to the wine cellar, while Fleet is still busying himself with something else in the train room. Suddenly, Fleet hears John cry out, "Oh my God!" On the floor of the dark room, where Fleet had previously not been able to locate the light switch, lies the lifeless body of Jean-Benet Ramsey. She was wrapped in a white blanket, had a piece of black duct tape over her mouth, and a cord bound her hands above her head. Another cord, tied to a wooden garrote, was wrapped around her neck. It would later be discovered that she had also sustained an 8.5-inch skull fracture. With less than a week left in the year, it was the first homicide to be recorded in Boulder, Colorado for 1996.
How do you want Jean-Benet remembered? How do you remember her?
Well, I mean, like all parents would say, she was a perfect child, but the thing that I remember about her was that if I would frown, she would look at me and say, "Dad, I don't like that face." And I'd smile and she said, "That's better." It's just the way she was.
She loved her daddy. She loved her daddy. She was daddy's girl.
The behaviour of John and Patsy Ramsey on the morning of December 26th, and in the days following, has been viewed with suspicion by many people on a number of counts, one of which can be seen on screen right now. We're not talking about the look on Patsy Ramsey's face. She was apparently taking anti-anxiety medication at the time, which is more than understandable, no matter how exactly her daughter's death transpired. We're talking about this. The Ramseys made this appearance on national media on January 1st of 1997 in Atlanta, Georgia, 6 days after Jean-Benet's murder. While the Ramseys had moved to Boulder for John's work, it was Atlanta they truly considered home, so that's where they opted to have Jean-Benet buried. The interview frustrated a number of Boulder police officials, as it gave them the impression that the Ramseys were more interested in speaking to the media than to the people who were in charge of figuring out who murdered their daughter. At this point, neither of the Ramseys had sat for formal police interviews and had already lawyered up, which intensified police suspicions that John and Patsy Ramsey may have something to hide. This channel has stressed several times in the past that seeking legal counsel as soon as you may be suspected of a crime is the smart thing to do, which it absolutely is from the standpoint of self-preservation. It is, however, difficult to think of a force more prone to cause someone to put their self-preservation instincts in the back seat than a desire to catch their child's murderer. The Ramseys' apparent aversion to unqualified cooperation with police does not prove anything, but it is certainly worth noting.
Ramsey, you found the note. It was a handwritten note, 3 pages.
The note was lying across the 3 pages across the run of one of the stair treads, and it was kind of dimly lit. It was just very early in the morning, and I started to read it, and it was addressed to John. It said, "Mr. Ramsey," and it said, "We have your daughter." And it just wasn't registering, and I may have gotten through another sentence like, "I can't. We have your daughter," and I don't know if I got any further than that. And I immediately ran back upstairs and pushed open her door, and she was not in her bed.
This small, or maybe not so small detail, caught the attention of investigators very early on. When Patsy spoke to Officer French, she said she had checked JonBenet's bedroom to find it empty before rushing downstairs and finding the note. By the time she spoke to Detective Arndt, not more than 2 hours later, the order had switched. She found the note before rushing upstairs to JonBenet's bedroom to confirm her daughter was missing, the version of events she just stated in the CNN interview. It's not clear how the change in sequence could be to her advantage, but it doesn't seem like a typical candidate for standard misremembering. The experience of getting up early, finding a strange note, realizing it's from someone claiming to have kidnapped your daughter, then rushing up to her room to confirm in one horrible instant she has in fact vanished would be a very vivid experience, as would checking your daughter's room to find she's missing before wandering the house in confusion and mounting panic, finding the note and having the realization of what's happening begin to wash over you as you read it. While the nightmare conclusion to both scenarios is the same, the motions of going through them would be very distinct from one another. It's hard to imagine someone making such an error in recollection, especially so soon after living through the experience. If they never did live through the experience, the mistake of course would make a lot more sense. When making things up on the fly, it's quite easy to forget in what order things went in your last telling.
And I screamed for John.
It said, don't call the police, that type of thing.
More specifically, the note repeatedly emphasized that JonBenet would promptly be killed if they were monitored doing such a thing.
And I told Patsy to call the police immediately,
It's curious that neither John or Patsy seemed to consider for one moment the author of the note might actually be monitoring them and willing to follow through on the threat, particularly John, who seems to indicate he read the note in full.
I think I ran through the house a bit.
We went to check our son.
Checked our son's room. Sometimes she sleeps in here.
At no point, by their accounts, had John or Patsy woken JonBenet's older brother Burke before 7 a.m. when they had him evacuated from the house. On one hand, you'd like to allow that parents in that scenario would not want to thrust the trauma of such a frantic situation onto their 9-year-old son. But on the other, what parent could resist the urge to wake the only potential witness to their daughter's kidnapping to ask if there was anything he might have seen or heard during the night? Burke was not interviewed by police before leaving for the Whites, but John Ramsey was adamant he had slept through the night.
And we
were just frantic, and I dialed the police and 911. And she was trying to calm me down, and I said our child had been kidnapped, and she was trying to very methodically, and I was just screaming, send help, send help.
How did you happen later to look in the basement?
Well, we'd waited until after the time that the call was supposed to have been made to us.
As was mentioned earlier, according to Detective Arndt, neither of the Ramseys had mentioned to anyone at the time that 10 a.m. had come and gone without word from the kidnapper. In fairness though, just because someone does not vocalize something doesn't mean they're not thinking about it.
And one of the detectives asked me and my friend who was there to go through every inch of the house, see if there's anything that was unusual or abnormal that looked out of place.
Looking for clues,
I think she was asking us to do that more to give us something to do to occupy our mind. And so we started in the basement, and we have one room in the basement that when I opened the door, there are no windows in that room, and I turned the light on, and I hoped that she was still okay, but I could tell that she probably wasn't. And I screamed and carried her upstairs. And
was she hidden in any way?
No.
When will you go back to Boulder?
Soon.
In a matter of days, you would think? It's going to be difficult.
It's going to be very difficult for us. When we first left, we didn't think we could go back. But
I said the only reason I will go back is to help them find out who did this. That is the only reason. And I will do that.
Police in Boulder, however, would continue to find the Ramseys' approach to the case less than helpful. When investigators travelled to Atlanta to interview them, they were met with the news that the Ramseys had decided to again travel elsewhere in the country. Whether that move was confirmation that they were deliberately avoiding speaking with authorities, or just an unfortunate coincidence, is not something that we can state as fact either way, but police certainly read the Ramseys' behaviour as evasive. A former lead detective on the case, Steve Thomas, has described John Ramsey as retreating into a legal stronghold that could not be cracked. Not only did the Ramseys hire public relations professionals to help communicate with the media, as well as a team of lawyers, John hired Patsy, her own attorney, which was read as potentially indicating the couple could have conflicting interests in the case, a situation which would be hard to imagine if an intruder was responsible for murdering their daughter. The lawyers consistently denied requests for real-time, face-to-face interviews with their clients, only answering questions in writing. Even when working within those very restrictive circumstances, the investigators were able to glean some useful information, but not information that steered them away from the possibility of one or both of the parents being involved. They stated Jean Benet may have eaten some seafood, such as cracked crab or shrimp at the Whites' Christmas party. They never mentioned pineapple, remnants of which had been found in her lower intestine during her autopsy. A bowl containing pineapple had been found on the Ramseys' dining room table that had Patsy's fingerprints on it. The notion that a mother feeding her daughter pineapple could link her to her daughter's murder may seem tenuous at first glance, but note that Jean Benet eating pineapple, or anything else for that matter when she got home, conflicts with the Ramseys' claim that she was put straight to bed. If Jean Benet wasn't asleep from the time she arrived home, what could the Ramseys have to gain from saying she was? After many back and forths, investigators were finally able to come to terms with the Ramseys on face-to-face interviews. They were held on April 30th, 1997, a full 4 months after Jean Benet's murder. The terms included the Ramseys having their attorneys present, as well as being given police reports in advance of the interviews. This was a giant concession, as suspects with access to such reports have the opportunity to review all of their previously recorded statements and get their story straight. The terms also forbade any video recording. Sorry to disappoint. Though even without the visual element, there are some interesting exchanges in those interviews that are worth having a quick look at. One apparent discrepancy crops up around Patsy's reading of the ransom note. Patsy reasserts that she only read the very beginning of the note before rushing up to Jean Benet's bedroom. There's a problem here though. You might remember in the 911 call, she actually makes reference to the note's sign-off.
There's a ransom note here.
It's a ransom note?
It says SBTC. Victory.
An explanation for that could be that Patsy had the note in her hand and was rifling through it as she spoke to the operator. That's made a little less plausible by the fact that she puts Victory and SBTC in the wrong order, but still possible. Patsy, however, blocks herself off from that explanation. She states that John was hunched over the note, reading it on the floor as she was calling 911. So her sequences found the note, read the first few lines, rushed upstairs, called for John, John got the note, she got on the phone to 911. It's hard to see an opportunity for her in this story to become familiar with the words Victory SBTC. Maybe sometime between calling for John and him reading the note, she had a chance to glance through those pages and spot a few extra things. Again, Patsy puts a fair amount of distance between herself and these more charitable explanations. She isn't completely sure she even touched it with her hands at any given point, and projects an ignorance of its contents that could be read as protesting too much. At one time, for instance, claiming she does not know what Detective Steve Thomas is talking about when he makes reference to a small foreign faction. Granted, reading the words of your daughter's murderer would be painful beyond words. But how easy is it for you to believe that in the several months following that December morning, Patsy was able to refrain from giving the most solid piece of evidence the culprit left behind a close enough look to even know who they claimed to be? Given the intense media coverage the case was getting, can you imagine her being able to maintain this level of unfamiliarity with the note's contents, even if she tried? In John Ramsey's interview, he again states that Jean Benet was asleep in the car when they got home and was put straight to bed, never waking up in the process. According to police reports though, his story on the 26th was that he read to Jean Benet before she went to bed. Again, we have a charitable explanation for this discrepancy. If reading to Jean Benet before bed was the usual routine, it's possible that when speaking to police, with his mind rushing all over the place, he instinctively went back to the night that stuck to the routine instead of the one that broke it. But just like Patsy, John's approach to a potentially thorny issue made life a little more difficult. He is actually quite adamant he would not have made such a mistake. His explanation is that he read before going to bed, and he might have said that which was then misinterpreted. The problem with this is that the account of reading to JonBenet is mentioned in two separate police reports, those of Officer French and Detective Arndt. It seems highly unlikely two officers would have the same odd misunderstanding independently. The accusation that the Ramseys are deliberately lying about putting JonBenet straight to bed raises the question of how that lie would help them. They are innocent in any scenario where an intruder breaks into their house in the middle of the night and murders their daughter. That can happen whether she's put straight to bed or is up and about for a time after they enter the house. How does the former work better for them? The fact of the matter is, we simply don't have a solid answer to that question. When looking at this detail through an RDI lens, the best theory we can put forward is that it may well not have really mattered, but the Ramseys felt like it could have at the time. If something severe happened to JonBenet before she was usually put to bed, then they might have decided sometime after initially speaking with police on the 26th that it would be most to their advantage to make that window of time as uneventful as possible by having her already asleep, not interacting with any of the family at all. Total speculation, but the bottom line is the available evidence indicates John Ramsey seems to have deliberately changed his story on this detail. The day after their formal interviews, the Ramseys participated in another press conference.
To those of you who may want to ask, let me address very directly, I did not kill my daughter JonBenet. There have also been innuendos that she has been or was sexually molested. I can tell you those were the most hurtful innuendos to us as a family. They are totally false. JonBenet and I had a very close relationship. I will miss her dearly for the rest of my life.
I'm Patsy Ramsey, JonBenet's mother, and I'm grateful that we are finally able to meet together face to face. I'm appalled that anyone would think that John or I would be involved in such a hideous, heinous crime. But let me assure you that I did not kill JonBenet. I did not have anything to do with it. I love that child with my whole of my heart and soul.
Mr. and Mrs. Ramsey, what do you want to say to the killer of your daughter?
We'll find you. We will find you. I have that as a sole mission for the rest of my life.
This is a curious choice of wording. All these years later, the Ramsey case is so infamous for its seeming unsolvability that it's easy to take it having no end in sight for granted. But you have to remember that this press conference took place just a little over 4 months after the murder, which must have felt like yesterday to John Ramsey. But he doesn't say, "Your days are numbered," or even, "We will find you if it takes the rest of my life." Instead, he uses language that conveys that he already knows the killer will not be caught in a matter of days, weeks, or months.
Mrs. Ramsey?
Likewise, the police and investigators have assured us that this is a case which can be solved. You know, you may be eluding the authorities for a time, but God knows who you are, and we will find you.
One of the issues that was distressing to us, and it perhaps caused some bias of opinion, is why did we bring lawyers into this process early on? And I can tell you both how that happened and why it happened. The how is that on the day after the tragedy, we were being consoled by friends and family, and a close friend of mine who was also a practicing attorney took me aside and said, "John, I see some things developing here that I would like to ask your permission to do some things that I think are necessary to be done." And I said, "Fine, do it." And so he retained counsel for Patsy and I. And we later learned, and really later was really the next few days, that the reason he did this is that sadly for our country, most tragedies of this nature, the killing of a child, apparently in the majority of cases are family related.
This is true. According to the Department of Justice, about 11% of those who murder juveniles are officially classified as strangers. An additional 29% are unidentified, though, quote, some of those unidentified offenders are probably family members or acquaintances of young child victims. Also bear in mind, these are just the broad statistics. If you were to narrow the circumstances down to juvenile homicides where the body was found in their house, it is safe to assume the statistical likelihood of familial involvement would dramatically increase.
And I think that's a tragic statement for our country. But because we were the parents of John Bonet, we were automatically put in the suspect pool. And so to not have knowledgeable counsel, my close friend felt would be foolish. Now, we also, at that time, as a parent, I looked at retaining of attorneys. We also brought in a couple of investigative firms, some experts that we assembled. I felt a very helpless feeling as to what can I do to help solve this case. Had it been in my power, I would have called out the National Guard, frankly. So as we looked at this group of people that we pulled together, it was not only to advise us in this process, but hopefully to assist the investigation to a closure. We spoke with the police approximately 8 hours on the 26th, another 2 hours on the 27th, have supplied them with every piece of information we have. So the impression that we haven't spoken with the police is totally false.
This is an example of a statement that is technically true, but still misleading. When police talk about wanting to speak with suspects, obviously they mean formal interviews, like the ones the Ramseys submitted themselves to just prior to this televised appearance. Of course they spoke to police who arrived on scene on the morning of the murder. Boulder Police Supervisor Larry Mason and Detective Linda Arndt also visited the house the Ramseys were staying at on the evening of the 26th and spoke with John. The meeting lasted about 40 minutes. They did not get an opportunity to speak with Patsy, as they were told she was too unwell and heavily medicated. Short meetings like this might be better than nothing, but they are nowhere near as advantageous to investigators as a pre-prepared formal interview or interrogation. This is what Ramsey critics are referring to when they accuse the Ramseys of not talking to police.
What has been delayed has been this formal interrogation of us as suspects. And frankly, we were, as you might imagine, insulted that we would even be considered suspects in the death of our daughter, and felt that an interrogation of us was a waste of our time and a waste of the police's time. But because they have to do this, we were willing to do it, but not under any circumstance that was presented to us.
You know, we would like to think that we don't know anyone that we have ever met in our lives who could do such a thing to a child. You know, but they talked with us and said, please tell us names of people, you know, who may have been in your home at any time. You know, we just outpoured information just as much as we could try to remember. But, you know, no one specifically came to mind. I mean, you can't imagine such a horrible thing ever happening, much less somebody that you may know.
An arrest is absolutely necessary in our lives for closure. Our lives cannot go on the same as they might have had John Bonet still been here. But I know how I feel today, and that an arrest must be made for us to go on with some semblance of a life and hope for the future.
One of the reasons we asked you all to be here this morning is that we need your help from this moment on. I know you have been diligently covering this case, and we have appreciated some of what you've said. I have to be frank, not all of what you've said. But we need to all work together as a team, and we need your help. Some of you may have seen the ad that we placed in our local Daily Camera newspaper this past weekend. This reward money has been offered since the death of Jean Bonet, but we felt like it wasn't getting out to the public enough. So this ad with her most recent kindergarten picture will be appearing more and more frequently. And what we want to let everyone know is that this $100,000 reward is for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the killer of our daughter. We feel like there are at least 2 people on the face of this earth that know who did this, and that is the killer and someone that person may have confided in. And we need that one phone call. We need the one phone call to this number that will help the authorities come to a conclusion to this case.
But many authorities believed the thing most likely to bring a conclusion to this case was not a $100,000 reward issued to the public, but an admission from the Ramseys that there was something they knew that they had been hiding. Many have argued that some of the biggest clues that there was no kidnapping gone wrong lie in that bizarre ransom note. It was found to be written on paper from a pad belonging to the Ramseys, and with a felt-tipped pen they also owned. That alone looks bad enough, but when examining the actual content of the note, there seems to be red flag after red flag that screams the author is not anything like who they're claiming to be.
We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction.
When attempting to intimidate someone, why would you describe your organization as small? It is also relatively uncommon for someone to refer to themselves as foreign. Everyone is native to their country of origin.
We respect your business, but not the country that it serves. At this time, we have your daughter in our possession.
The author misspells business and possession. 2 mistakes in 2 sentences. From this point forward, there will be barely any other errors across the note's 2.5 pages. The ones that do appear will be minor grammatical mistakes, such as using a instead of an. Furthermore, the author will use words that are noticeably more sophisticated than simpler alternatives, such as attaché, complete with accent, and the formal transitional adverb hence. These decisions indicate an educated author. Some have theorized that all of this hints that when the author made those 2 elementary spelling mistakes toward the beginning, they were trying to depict themselves as someone else, but fell into old habits as they continued writing and failed to keep up the ruse with consistent errors.
You will withdraw $118,000 from your account.
$118,000 is obviously a strangely specific figure, as well as a comically paltry sum given John Ramsey is a multi-millionaire. It was soon discovered that John received a bonus payment from his work to the tune of $118,223, which was printed on pay stubs in the house.
The delivery will be exhausting, so I advise you to be rested.
Why would a kidnapper care if their target was exhausted by a delivery of ransom money? Also, given the plan is for John Ramsey to discover this note upon waking up, and for him to deliver the money that very same day, how more well-rested could he reasonably be? Before pickup, the word delivery is scribbled over. Someone pretending to be a kidnapper might initially write that JonBenet would be delivered, before realizing kidnappers would never personally deliver their abductee. An actual kidnapper would never need to remind themselves of such a thing.
Don't try to grow a brain, John.
The author begins the note with the formal Mr. Ramsey and ends it with the personal John. Again, some have pointed to this as a sign the author may be someone familiar with John Ramsey, trying to pose as a stranger, but they fell out of character as they continued writing. These are just a handful of the note's oddities we feel are among the most interesting. It has been picked apart so extensively by criminologists and forum posters over the years that we're confident there is not so much as a single phrase within it that has not been subject to tomes of analysis from a variety of angles. Beyond analysis of the note's verbiage is the question of the author's handwriting. Something we should note up front here is that the discipline of handwriting analysis, in and of itself, is quite contentious. Various handwriting experts have offered various opinions of the ransom note, and the short version is that no one outside the family has ever been a strong match. John and obviously Burke have been eliminated as possible authors, but not Patsy. Now, not eliminating someone is not the same as conclusively implicating them. Some experts have concluded that the author is likely Patsy, others that it is unlikely, while others have been even less committal and just settled on cannot eliminate. We don't have time to run you through multiple assessments and all of their observations, so to make things simple, we'll just pick out a few examples that we think contain some interesting similarities. You can decide how compelling you think they are. Both Patsy and the author of the note often use the horizontal stroke of a lowercase t to link to the next letter of a word, as seen in the word southern. Note too how the bottom of their H's jut out a little. We see the lowercase t linking pattern again with the word instruction, but even more notable is a linking combo that can be found in the letters CTI. The bottom of the C shoots out in a horizontal line to the bottom of the T, the horizontal stroke of which connects to the top of the I. And then our personal favourite, electronic. The E and the L link in a similar way, but what really stands out is a 4-letter combo in the middle. The bottom of the C juts out horizontally to just above the bottom of the T, the horizontal stroke of which links to the top of the R, which in turn links to the top right of the O. Beyond that, Patsy and the ransom note author have segmented the multi-syllable word in precisely the same way. EL linked, E standing alone, CTRO linked, NI and C all standing alone. So now that we've been over some of the circumstances and behaviour that have been argued to indicate that one or both of JonBenet Ramsey's parents were involved in her death and proceeded to cover it up, the big questions that remain are why would they ever do such a thing, and how exactly did this atrocity transpire? As stated at the outset of this video, even 100,000 hours would not permit us to unpack every specific scenario that has been theorised to this end. There are theories that John did it, that Patsy did it, that both were involved with the cover-up, that one tried to hide what happened from the other, and then countless variations within those basic premises, and different explanations as to what their motivations might have been and what the specific sequence of events was. Having said that, just telling you there are varying opinions, so who knows, would be a bit of a lump of coal to put in a true crime Christmas stocking. So in the interest of giving you something, we'll present you with a scenario that Detective Steve Thomas theorized that involves Patsy being the culprit. After that, we'll unpack another way of looking at the circumstances of the crime scene that have been argued by a forum poster known as Doc G to implicate John. This is in no way an endorsement of these two theories as the most plausible to have ever been conceptualized within the RDI worldview. They are just examples of how two people familiar with the case put the pieces of the puzzle together to form a story of how everything came to be as it was on the morning of the 26th. Thomas's theory involves JonBenet wetting her bed. It should be stated that he inferred that from pieces of evidence he'll mention. It is not an established fact that JonBenet wet the bed that night.
Approaching 40th birthday, the busy holiday season, an exhausting Christmas day, and an argument with JonBenet had left Patsy frazzled. JonBenet, who had not eaten much at the White's party, was hungry. Her mother let her have some pineapple, and then the kids were put to bed. Patsy stayed up to prepare for the trip to Michigan the next morning, a trip she admittedly did not particularly want to make. Later, JonBenet awakened after wetting her bed, as indicated by the plastic sheets, the urine stains, the pull-up diaper package hanging halfway out of a cabinet. Patsy would not be the first mother to lose control in such a situation. One of the doctors we consulted cited toileting issues as a textbook example of causing a parental rage. So in my hypothesis, there was some sort of explosive encounter in the child's bathroom sometime prior to 1 o'clock in the morning, the time suggested by the digestion rate of the pineapple found in the child's stomach. I believe JonBenet was slammed against a hard surface such as the edge of a tub, inflicting a mortal head wound. She was unconscious, but her heart was still beating. Patsy would not have known that JonBenet was still alive because the child already appeared to be dead. The massive head trauma would have eventually killed her. It was the critical moment in which she had to either call for help or find an alternative explanation for her daughter's death. It was accidental in the sense that the situation had developed without motive or premeditation. She could have called for help but chose not to. An emergency room doctor probably would have questioned the accident and called the police. I believe panic overtook her. John and Burke continued to sleep while Patsy moved the body of JonBenet down to the basement and hid her in the little room. Patsy needed a diversion and planned the way she thought a kidnapping should look. At some point, she drafted the long ransom note. By doing so, she created the government's best piece of evidence. She then faced the major problem of what to do with the body. Leaving the house carried the risk of John or Burke awakening at the sounds and possibly being seen by a passerby or a neighbor. Leaving the body in the distant, almost inaccessible basement room was the best option. As I envisioned it, Patsy returned to the basement, a woman caught up in panic, where she could have seen, perhaps by detecting a faint heartbeat or a sound or a slight movement, that although completely unconscious, JonBenet was not dead. Others might argue that Patsy did not know the child was still alive. In my hypothesis, she took the next step, looking for the closest available items in desperation. Only feet away was her paint tote. She grabbed a paintbrush and broke it to fashion the garrote with some cord. Then she looped the cord around the girl's neck. In my scenario, she choked JonBenet from behind with a grip on her broken paintbrush handle, pulling the ligature. JonBenet, still unconscious, would never have felt it. This accident, in my opinion, had just become a murder. Throughout the coming hours, Patsy worked on her staging, such as placing the ransom note where she would be sure to find it the next morning. With the clock ticking and hearing her husband moving around upstairs, She stepped over the edge. The way I envisioned it, Patsy screamed, and John Ramsey, coming out of the shower, responded, totally unaware of what had occurred. Patsy Ramsey opened the door to Officer Rick French about 5:55 a.m. on the morning of December 26, 1996, wearing a red turtleneck sweater and black pants, the same thing she had worn to a party the night before. Her hair was done, her makeup was on. In my opinion, she had never been to bed. The diversion worked for 7 hours as the Boulder police thought they were dealing with a kidnapping. John Ramsey, in my hypothetical scenario, probably first grew suspicious while reading the ransom note that morning, which was why he was unusually quiet. He must have seen his wife's writing mannerisms all over it, everything but her signature. But where was his daughter? He said in his police interview that he went down to the basement when Detective Arndt noticed him missing. I suggested that Ramsey found JonBenet at that time and was faced with the dilemma of his life. During the next few hours, his behavior changed markedly as he desperately considered his few options: submit to the authorities or try to control the situation. So when Detective Linda Arndt told him to search the house, he used the opportunity and made a beeline for the basement. Then, tormented as he might be, he chose to protect his wife.
The poster known as Doc G counters that it was in fact John, and John alone, who was responsible for JonBenet's death. Here is the key piece of evidence he believes clears Patsy.
911 emergency.
That's it. Patsy called 911. It may seem very reductive at first, but Doc G's theory becomes more and more intriguing as you continue to think about it. Let's take another look at key portions of the ransom note.
Speaking to anyone about your situation, such as police, FBI, etc., will result in your daughter being beheaded. If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies. If you alert bank authorities, she dies. You can try to deceive us, but be warned that we are familiar with law enforcement countermeasures and tactics. You and your family are under constant scrutiny as well as the authorities.
The note may be puzzling in a lot of ways, but one thing we can be sure of is that whoever wrote it did not want the person who wound up reading it to call the police. If Patsy wrote those words, it makes absolutely no sense that she would disobey the instructions she had given herself. Obviously 9-year-old Burke isn't the author, so if you're of the school of thought that the culprit is not someone from outside the house, you're left with John. It's that simple. So why and how? As to the why, all we'll say is that JonBenet's autopsy noted, quote, chronic inflammation, close quote, in her genital area. Various medical experts have interpreted these sorts of findings to be indicative of sexual abuse prior to the night of her death. It should be noted this is a matter of contention. It is not an established fact JonBenet was abused prior to the night of her death, but if you take a deep dive into the medical arguments and come out agreeing with the view that she most likely was, then you shouldn't have to use too much imagination to think of a motivation for John. Doc G's contention, though, is that the specific motive is secondary. Once you accept the facts that point in John's direction, key pieces of evidence that were once so perplexing begin to elegantly fall into place. One such piece of evidence central to his hypothesis is the broken basement window. It was mentioned in Chapter 1 that when Ramsey friend Fleet White searched the basement, he noticed a window was broken, and that John later disclosed he had done that months earlier when he was locked out. A very strange thing to admit if you were trying to sell the idea of an intruder and were in need of a plausible point of entry. Well, here's Doc's explanation. The window actually was broken that night, by John, for the purpose of staging a break-in, but he hadn't finished the job. There was a considerable amount of undisturbed grime, as well as an intact cobweb on the sill, which was a dead giveaway no grown adult had squeezed themselves through the window. John planned on doing this, but he had either run out of time as the hour of Patsy's alarm clock approached, or he had always planned on doing it later. The ransom note that he wrote while successfully disguising his handwriting, perhaps by tracing a computer font such as Courier knew, instructed,
I will call you between 8 and 10 a.m. tomorrow to instruct you on delivery.
John had intended that to be perceived as meaning tomorrow from the day the note was read. His plan was that Patsy would discover the note, ask him what they were going to do, and he would say that he would handle it alone, just like the author wanted.
It is up to you now, John.
He would tell Patsy to take Burke to a safe location and not tell a soul about their situation, lest the kidnappers make good on their threat to behead JonBenet. From there, he would have all day and night to remove and dump the body, as well as complete all the staging, including crawling through the basement window in the dead of night, when all of his neighbors were asleep and there was no one in the house to hear him. On the 27th, when the fake kidnappers failed to return his daughter, he would then alert police, along with the perfect reason for not contacting them earlier in the form of the note. But when Patsy discovered the note, things did not go according to plan. As soon as she got to the line,
"We have your daughter in our possession,"
she hit the roof, wasn't able to fully absorb the entirety of the note's contents, and was on the phone before John could get his bearings, figure out a way to talk her down, and explain why she couldn't call the police.
Note was left in your daughter's phone.
Now he was in big trouble. As soon as police found a broken, unlatched window, and then realized the lack of disturbance meant nobody could have passed through it, they would put two and two together and see that it was staging. So from there, he set to unstaging. Here's where things start to look extremely suspicious. As Steve Thomas mentioned, John Ramsey would later disclose that that morning he had investigated the basement by himself. In his formal 1997 interview, he told police that when he went down there, he noticed that the broken window was open and that a Samsonite suitcase was oddly positioned beneath it. John states that he then shut and latched the window. He did not mention the window or the suitcase at all to any investigators on site on the morning of the 26th, and didn't mention finding it open and latching it shut until his formal interview in April. Imagine that. You think your daughter has been kidnapped, you find a potential point of entry, and you don't even mention it? Doc G theorizes he likely went and shut the window very shortly after Patsy made the call, realizing it was going to be a dead giveaway. Months later, veteran detective Lou Smith was brought on to investigate the case by the Boulder DA and wound up becoming a staunch proponent of the Ramsey family's innocence. When Smith was beginning to think the window actually was a potential point of entry, John tried helping the theory along by then disclosing his supposed discovery that the window was in fact open, but that he shut it. Over the years, it seems that John has reconciled himself to the fact that not finding the open window and suitcase concerning is preposterous. Watch his characterization of the discovery in this 2000 interview with Barbara Walters.
The police searched your house, but they didn't find John Bonet. But at one point, you went downstairs and found an open window.
Yes.
A window that you had broken yourself at one point to put your hand through and find the latch.
Right.
What did you think when you saw this open window?
I was a bit alarmed, but I was more alarmed with the Samsonite suitcase that was standing up below the window.
I have seen the actual police photograph that was taken of that window and the suitcase, and there it was in full sight.
That looked wrong. That suitcase did not belong there.
It was out of place.
It's out of place.
So you thought perhaps the kidnapper had gone through that window?
That was my first impression, yes.
But the fact of the matter is, on that morning, he did not mention either. It's safe to call that a fact, because he did not make any contention about not mentioning it until years later. During a 1998 interview, even Lou Smith appears to have trouble with John not mentioning the open window that morning. John's explanation is that they sometimes left the window open because the basement got very hot, so he just didn't think it was a big deal in the moment. Note that you don't need to open broken windows to let cool air in.
And I see John Ramsey carrying Jean Bonnet up the last 3 steps from the basement. And my mind exploded. Everything that I had noted that morning that stuck out instantly made sense. And Jean Bonnet was clearly dead. Then she's been dead for a while. I ordered him to put Jean Bonnet down. I knelt next to her and I leaned down to her face. And John leaned down opposite me, and his face was just inches from mine. And we had a nonverbal exchange that I will never forget. And he asked if she was dead. And I said, yes, she's dead. And I told him to go back to the room and to dial 911. And as we looked at each other, I remember, and I wore a shoulder holster, tucking my gun right next to me and consciously counting, I've got 18 bullets.
Why did you do that?
Because I didn't know if we'd all be alive when people showed up. I said everything made sense in that instance, and I knew what happened.
Do you think your fear was well-founded?
You bet I do. There's no doubt in my mind.
To this day?
Never wavered.
You were afraid because you thought the killer was still in the house.
I knew it.
Absolutely.
Oh my God, please.
Okay, well,
Please, somebody.
I am, honey.
Please.
Take a deep breath.
Please,
Okay.
hurry.
Patsy, Patsy.
According to some, you just heard the voice of 9-year-old Burke Ramsey. Though if you weren't deliberately keeping an ear out for it, we think it's safe to assume you missed it, if it is there at all. It's not purported to be in the background as Patsy is speaking with the operator, but in the few seconds after she puts the phone down and the line doesn't fully terminate, you can supposedly also hear John and Patsy speaking. Listen again. One thing you have to keep in mind with these sorts of things is the human brain is very suggestible. Once you're told something is in a piece of audio like this, often it seems to magically become many-fold easier to hear it than when you first listened. Maybe that's because you now know what to listen for, but it could also just be the power of suggestion. With that in mind, listen one more time without being told what words have been claimed to be in here, and see what, if anything, you can make out independently. If you want to really make an exercise out of it, you can listen back several times, write down what you think, and put your results in the comments section. In the first section, it has been said that you can hear John Ramsey say, "We're not speaking to you." Chances are no one got that. If it's there, it's very distant and is supposed to be most audible in enhanced, noise-reduced versions not readily available to the public. Some say they can hear Patsy say "sweetie," which seems more discernible. In the next section, it has been said that we can hear Patsy say, "What did you do? What did you..." or "What did you do? Help me, Jesus." It's been said that at the end, you can hear a voice that sounds like a male child say, "What did you find?" Others, however, say they hear, "Are they gonna arrest me?" No matter what the words are, if they are words being spoken by Burke Ramsey's voice, then the Ramseys have just been caught in a very big lie. As you'll recall, their story was that Burke never woke up, so what's a scenario in which they would have a reason to lie about that? One theory is that he got into some kind of tussle with JonBenet during the night while the parents were asleep, perhaps after she teasingly snatched a piece of pineapple from a bowl he was eating from, and he wound up smacking her over the head with a mag flashlight that was found on the kitchen counter, causing the skull fracture. Sometime after that, the parents awake to discover what happened, and then, to protect their son, proceed to stage the botched kidnapping, including the binding and garroting of their 6-year-old daughter's lifeless body. The BDI argument is put forward most notably in the book Foreign Faction by James Kohler, a law enforcement professional who was assigned as lead investigator on the Ramsey case by the Boulder DA in 2004, resigning in 2006 due to frustrations with what he saw as the department's conscious decision to not pursue probative leads. Though we should note that Kohler never actually comes right out and says Burke was responsible for the head blow. You don't exactly have to be a master of reading between the lines to get what he's driving at over the course of the book's 500-odd pages. In 2016, the book was adapted into a 2-part special on CBS called The Case of JonBenet Ramsey. Fronted by former FBI profiler Jim Clemente and criminal behavioral analyst Laura Richards, the investigative program was, well, very irritating, quite frankly. The pretense of the show was that Clemente and Richards put together a crack team of some of the world's most revered forensic experts to do a from-the-ground-up re-examination of all the evidence to determine once and for all what really happened. Sounds like a great idea, but when every line of inquiry is obviously tailored to lead the project down the path of the book that it's so clearly based on, it becomes difficult to not groan aloud as you watch the investigators pretend to have game-changing revelations based on information they would have known about months before cameras started rolling.
Oh my God, what did you find?
What did you find?
Right, what did you find? It sounds like a smaller voice though, it doesn't sound like a booming adult.
Right.
Couple that with CSI-style cinematography and music scoring, and the case of JonBenet Ramsey was all in all a rather gaudy affair when it came to presentation. And unlike James Kohler's book, when they were done going over all their favourite pieces of evidence, the Case of team did come right out and say what they thought really happened, and CBS got the pantsuit off of them. They eventually settled with Burke Ramsey on undisclosed terms. Aesthetic criticisms and lawsuits aside, arguments put forward by BDI theorists do warrant serious consideration. One front they're strongest on is simply the narrative. The Ramseys have received a lot of criticism for having JonBenet compete in child beauty pageants, an issue this video hasn't even found occasion to mention up until this point. And the only reason we raise it now is to acknowledge the one known aspect of John and Patsy's parenting that could be seen as significantly abnormal or perhaps even abusive. As gross as the average person may find child pageantry, however, within certain segments of the US, they're considered as wholesome as apple pie. And when it came to former Miss West Virginia Patsy Ramsey, the pageant served as a mother-daughter bonding opportunity. Or if you want to be less charitable, a means to live out her prime years vicariously through JonBenet. But there's no good reason to read anything more sinister into the pageants than that. Point is, everyone around the Ramseys always observed them to be loving parents. No red flags of abuse were ever observed by JonBenet's teachers or her pediatrician.
At the time I was her pediatrician, I saw absolutely no signs of sexual abuse. I had no suspicion of it.
Nothing whatsoever? No hints, nothing?
I always think about sexual abuse with any child, boy or girl, who comes through this practice because it is such a terribly destructive thing. And I think about it in each case, and if I see evidence, then I act on it. In JonBenet's case, I saw absolutely no evidence.
Either John or Patsy deliberately murdering JonBenet is very difficult to imagine, and even something like the sudden fit of rage resulting in accidental head trauma scenario is still a really tough sell for many who follow this case. Just from a self-preservation standpoint, calling an ambulance and trying to sell the idea that she had a bad fall would be a lot easier than trying to stage a botched kidnapping. Not to mention it would offer you some hope of your daughter not dying. But what if it's a scenario where the Ramseys come downstairs, realize what's happened, and that it's too late to save JonBenet? Their daughter is gone, but they still have their son. If they alert the authorities, however, he might be taken away from them and put into some sort of horrible institution. So in a panic, not thinking exactly rationally, they tell Berg to stay in his room and pretend to sleep, while they spend the next however many hours hastily throwing together their crime scene, figuring out their story and plan of attack. An anxious Berg can't help but emerge from his room while Patsy is on the phone to try and gauge just how much trouble he's in, and the Ramseys rush him back to bed before police arrive. Perhaps minutes, hours, weeks or months after Officer French first knocked on their door, they realized how stupid and immoral they were in doing all of this. But now what was and could have been appropriately treated as a tragic accident had become a series of felonies, so they were locked into this big lie for the rest of their lives. It's still a pretty fantastic scenario, but it's much easier to picture than a lot of others that have been put forward over the years. So what are some notable pieces of material evidence that might support it? One of them involves some curious marks that were found on JonBenet's back and face that the coroner described as unexplained abrasions. Lou Smith developed a theory about these.
Suddenly, it became apparent that the marks themselves, both on the back and on the face, were the same distance apart. Suddenly a little light went on, and it was just like, wait a minute. And we both hit on it about the same time that it was a stun gun. The stun gun that we came up with is this one, and it's the air taser stun gun. When the stun gun is energized, you see a light blue mark, and if you look closely at the blow-up, you'll see a light blue mark extending from one of the marks to the other on the back of JonBenet.
Air Taser would emphatically state there was no way their device would have made those marks. But putting that dispute aside, Smith theorized the weapon was used to knock JonBenet out. It's a rather remarkable idea for a law enforcement professional to come up with, given anyone with a vague familiarity with what stun guns are knows they don't actually stun people as such, rather cause them to lose control of their body as they writhe and scream in agony. In fairness, Smith's argument was that a 6-year-old girl would be knocked out cold, not a fully grown adult. And because no one can ethically put that theory to the test, we'll have to begrudgingly leave it on the table as a maybe. But an intruder would certainly have no reason to be confident about such an outcome in advance, and would be taking an extreme risk by creeping into JonBenet's bedroom, applying the stun gun to her, and just hoping for her to not wake up screaming bloody murder. So what's an alternative explanation for the marks? Kohler was eventually able to identify an item which he thought could be responsible. A loose piece of train track from one of Burke's train sets. Such a loose piece of track had been photographed on the floor of his room. When Kohler conducted a test, pressing the metal connection prongs of the same model track pieces belonged to Burke into the palm of a volunteer, he found the abrasions they left to be strikingly similar to the ones found on JonBenet, and they measured the approximate same length apart. Whoever and whatever was responsible for leaving those marks on JonBenet has never been confirmed with 100% certainty. It is, however, the opinion of this video that the theory they were left there by track prongs pushed into her by Burke, perhaps when prodding her for signs of consciousness, is much more convincing than the stun gun theory. Burke Ramsey was interviewed twice around the time of the killing of JonBenet. Although a very small portion of those sessions are available to the public, there are a couple of short clips that have come out that are worth having a quick look at. These are from a 1998 interview with Detective Dan Schuler.
What about Christmas Eve? When you were going up there, did you guys have a snack before you went to bed that night?
I forget.
What was JonBenet's favorite snack?
I don't think she had a snack.
Okay. Would she ever like a particular thing to eat during the day, for a snack?
Just whatever Mom had laid out. She always had laid out a snack for after school stuff. And so whatever she had ready, she could just eat.
And what would a typical snack be?
Pudding or just like leftover pizza or something.
So would there ever be, it sounds like your mom was pretty nutritional,
She wasn't that serious.
Wasn't she?
No.
Some moms cut up apples.
Yeah.
What else would she do fruit-wise?
That's all I know. Pineapple.
Pineapple?
Yeah.
You mentioned that once before. Is that kind of a favorite?
Yeah.
Is that probably the most favorite?
Apples or pineapple, probably.
Burke's police interview is a frustrating example of places in this case where you feel like something might be noteworthy, but at the same time have a nagging fear that you might be reading something into nothing. It's well established that both Burke and JonBenet really liked pineapple, so it comes across as if Burke is deliberately avoiding the fruit when Detective Schuler quizzes him on favourite snacks, and Burke responds with extended pauses and seems like he might be purposefully listing non-pineapple foods, even appearing to hesitate from naming pineapple for a moment when Schuler narrows snacks down to fruit.
What else would she do fruit-wise?
That's all I know. Pineapple.
More benign interpretations could be that his standoffish demeanour is simply the result of nervousness, or that he is deliberately avoiding pineapple, but only because over the course of the last year he has somehow picked up from his parents that investigators are associating the fruit with guilt in some way. So he could be nervous about admitting he enjoys it, even if neither he or JonBenet were up and about eating from that bowl on the night of her death.
Do you ever have any keys that maybe if you got locked out you could get somewhere? Some people keep keys kind of hidden under something, or out in the yard, or a secret hiding place that they can put a key, if they get locked out.
I remember one time we did get locked out, and there are, this is the drum basement, but there are 2 windows in the basement. We have 2 windows, and my dad had to break the windows and then go around and unlock the door. When the doors are locked, you can open them from the inside, but not the outside. So.
Are you talking about basement windows?
Yeah, he broke the basement windows, went through there, came up around.
Then let you in.
Yeah, then I think it was the front door.
Were you with him when he had to get in that way?
Yeah, I was with him, but I didn't actually go in. I was waiting.
Okay. You waited where?
I don't know where. This is the front door of the store.
Okay, so he had to let you in that way.
Yeah.
Well, this is curious. Burke's account here is simultaneously corroborating John's window break-in story, as well as complicating it. John said that his breaking of the window was during a time when Patsy and the children were in Charlevoix, Michigan. Now Burke is saying that he was with him at the time. There are all sorts of ways to interpret this. Maybe John has been coaching Burke to corroborate his story, but Burke has misunderstood exactly how, and has included the detail of actually being there, when he was just supposed to confirm that his dad broke the window once. Or maybe it was something that just happened more than once. John did eventually wind up saying he had to break in through the basement on more than one occasion. It could be that the occasion with Burke happened, as did the occasion when Patsy and the kids were in Charlevoix. Or it could be that one or both stories are fabrications. And finally, Burke Ramsey decided to sit down for an interview with Dr. Phil McGraw shortly after the CBS special aired.
My goal here is that you answer all the questions. You said I can ask you anything. Nothing is off limits. You speak about this one time. Some people have speculated that your parents weren't protecting you, they were hiding you.
Yeah.
And that for this last 20 years, that you've been hiding out instead of just choosing not to speak. What do you say to that?
For the last 20 years, I wanted to grow up like a normal kid, which does not include like going in front of TV cameras.
But if you had answered the curiosity, might that have stopped it all?
To me, it seemed like it would rouse it all up again.
Do you remember waking up that morning?
Yep. The first thing I remember is my mom bursting in my room, really frantic, saying like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, running around my room looking for JonBenet. At that point, I was awake. She left and could kind of hear her freaking out. And the next thing I remember is a police officer coming to my room and shining a flashlight.
How long after she came in before the police officer came in?
Under an hour.
So she comes in, and were you asleep when she came in? Did she wake you up?
She woke me up.
And she's running around your room saying, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. What else did she say? Did you know she was looking for JonBenet?
I remember her saying, where's my baby, where's my baby?
So after she left, what did you do?
I just laid there and didn't really know what else to do.
A lot has been made of Burke's strange smile in this interview, so we'll make note of it once, but just to get it out of the way. The smile is strange, but strange is not always synonymous with suspicious. Some people smile when they are nervous, and there is good reason to believe that Burke Ramsey is just one such person. Going into your first ever nationally televised interview in the wake of a major network documentary that has accused you of killing your sister is a situation that will make just about anyone nervous, regardless of whether they're guilty or innocent. Unfortunately, probably owing to the fact that McGraw's exclusive was arranged and negotiated through Ramsey attorney Lynn Wood, the interview doesn't contain any revelatory information either, except for maybe one thing.
How would they have broken into the house, do you think?
You know, I've heard the basement window. I remember for a long time, I think I unlocked the front door during Christmas Day, and I always felt bad about doing that. Not that a locked door would stop somebody if they wanted to do something like that.
This was new. So now the front door might have been completely unlocked that night? It seems unbelievable that John would not notice this and report that all the doors were locked. Maybe Burke left it open, but one of his parents locked it later. But for that to be true, we'd have to accept that Burke has disclosed his feelings of guilt for potentially leaving the killer an easy point of entry for the first time ever in this televised conversation. Surely if he had brought it up any time prior, his parents would have consoled him with the fact that they locked the door after him.
Did you go to JonBenet's funeral?
Yeah, I remember the viewing. I remember the casket was small and her eyes were closed. I think one of her eyes was a little bit like droopy or something, and I thought that was weird.
There is no denying that Burke's demeanour is odd, and if you want to read into his general oddness during his sit-down with Dr. Phil, you're more than welcome to look up the full thing and do just that. But we contend there is far too much substance in this case to be distracted by the occasional strange look or glance.
The door was latched. I unlatched and pulled it open, and instantly what I found.
Tell us about that, please.
Well, it was a rush of relief, but also fear because her eyes were closed. I immediately took the tape off of her mouth, tried to untie her arms were bound above her head. I tried to untie the knot, and I couldn't get it untied. Her skin was cool to the touch, and I picked her up, and that's when I screamed, because I was, I guess, just realizing that things were not going to be okay after all.
And things never have been since.
Well, yeah, they never will be. We've lost our child. It's never going to be the same.
What do you call this creature?
I don't think he's a human being. This is a subhuman. This person is a monster. How could you kill a beautiful, defenseless, 6-year-old child on Christmas Day? That's a monster. That's not that guy. I will not give this person the credit of calling them a human being.
John Ramsey's description of the person who murdered his daughter is very apt if you subscribe to a sequence of events that investigators such as Lou Smith have maintained is supported by the physical evidence. All of the arguments implicating the Ramseys that we've presented share one thing in common: head blow first, garroting second. There are some signs, however, that suggest the order may have been the other way around. To name a few, the large fracture in JonBenet's skull would have been expected to result in a major brain hemorrhage, which was not observed in her autopsy. The inference being that her heart was no longer pumping blood through her body at the time of the blow. Tiny hemorrhages were observed in JonBenet's eyes, consistent with someone who was being strangled while still alive. There were also several small half-moon-shaped abrasions above the area of JonBenet's neck where she was garroted. Lou Smith observed these abrasions to be consistent with fingernail marks, the inference being that JonBenet fought for her life as she was strangled. Why is all of this important? because it paints a picture of a slaying far too brutal to be easily reconciled with a tragic accident.
The garrote was made of the middle portion of that paintbrush, the handle. Her hair was actually entwined right in the wrappings of the garrote as the killer made it on the back of her neck, most likely when she was lying face down on the floor. He made a noose on the other end of this garrote. Then this noose was pulled very tightly against the neck of JonBenet, almost like a control device, almost like you were controlling a pet or a dog. Our killer has a fantasy in his mind what he wants to do with this garrote.
You have to throw the rope around the neck. In this particular case, you had to create an exactly kind of knot. You had to twist the knot. All while that child is still alive. Most of the time, those are sexual kind of killings. Parents don't kill in that manner. They bash. They throw the child out. They hit him on the head. And they do things of that nature. And what makes me believe this is also probably a sexual kind of killing is that there is an object that's jammed through the vagina of the child because blood is drawn. And that's not something a parent does.
Unfortunately, the world can sometimes be a horribly dark place, something the killing of JonBenet demonstrates in and of itself. So her being viciously strangled and sexually assaulted while still alive does not in fact categorically rule out a parent. To maintain it should not cast the notion of a family member being responsible into more doubt than if the head blow came first, however, is absurd. It seems that most RDI theorists accept this, as the vast majority of their scenarios involve the head blow coming first, usually as part of an accident. Even the ultra-sinister scenario posited by Doc G involves John intending to kill JonBenet with one merciful blow, only to find it did not quite finish the job. Neither the absence of brain hemorrhage or presence of fingernail marks fit with even a scenario wherein a parent is that evil. If you're not comfortable conceding the Ramseys aren't evil, because after all you don't know them, the next thing you need to ask is, are they stupid? The answer to that question is one that should be conceded without having to know them. Both John and Patsy were well educated. Intelligent people can still be murderers, of course, and smarter people than the Ramseys have botched the staging of a crime scene. But there is a degree of botching that really should be out of bounds for anyone capable of the most elementary logic and forethought. As we pointed out earlier, in a scenario where Patsy is involved, how could she call the police before figuring out a way to get the body out of the house? In a scenario where John was involved, how could it be to his benefit to immediately assert all the doors were locked? Points of entry is a topic we'll cover in a little more detail momentarily, but this particular point is a big one that's often overlooked. In basically all RDI scenarios, the Ramseys stage a break-in. You've heard a relatively complex one, where John broke the basement window but then had to set to unstaging, once it became apparent he wouldn't have time to make the scene look right. This theory comes close to making John out to be too cunning, but actually makes more sense than the standard school of thought, where John's story of a previous break-in was genuine, and he was just relying on police pinning that as the entry point. Because in that scenario, how could it be in his interest to not bring it to their attention as soon as possible, as well as volunteer an innocent explanation for the shattered glass? Both schools of thought share one thing in common though. They're too clever and complicated by half. If John Ramsey wanted to set up a plausible point of entry for a fake intruder, he could have just unlocked one of the first floor's many doors and claimed to have been one of the millions of people who failed to check every entrance to their house on any given night. No one would ever have been able to prove he was lying, and it's incredibly difficult to imagine this basic fact would never have occurred to him. As to the Burke scenario, the unrealistic failures in reasoning we've just been over apply to it as well. What's more, although John and Patsy probably weren't aware that the minimum age for criminal responsibility in Colorado was 10, meaning 9-year-old Burke couldn't be charged, it would seem uncharacteristically moronic of the Ramseys to really think he would have been institutionalized on account of hitting his sister on the head without realizing his own strength, tragic as the consequences were. But of course a sampling of factors pointing away from the Ramseys is not enough. What about factors pointing toward an intruder? Or at least to start with, making it possible for one to be in the house that night. Points of entry is an especially frustrating topic within this immensely frustrating case. To make a very long story short, there is no window or door in the household you can point to and say as an absolute fact, this was opened and a person came through it. The biggest go-to is of course the basement window. But as was mentioned in Chapter 2, there is a lack of disturbance to grime and cobwebs in that point of entry that critics say rule it out. This, we concede, is a very good point. Eyeballing Lou Smith entering through the space, it looks as if it may be possible to do so without breaking a web, but very unlikely. Even if you take a basement entry off the table though, and you accept that all doors and windows on the first floor were secured that evening, you can still get an intruder inside with what we think is a non-excessive amount of imagination. That is, that the intruder entered the house sometime between the Ramseys leaving for the Whites' Christmas party and returning home. Maybe through one of the hotly debated points of entry, maybe by simply finding an open door if the Ramseys had neglected to check one at that point, maybe even through JonBenet's balcony window. Like so many points in the Ramsey case, there is no smoking gun proving an intruder entered the house while the Ramseys were out, but it's certainly possible, and for many IDI theorists it is the strongest scenario. The reason being, it starts to clear up quite a few of the remaining problems. For instance, the ransom note.
First of all, it was done in a very calm, controlled way. The person was not writing this note in panic. I've interviewed many murderers and even psychopaths. After a murder, they are extremely agitated. It is very difficult for them even to sit down. There's no way that Patsy Ramsey could have written that note afterwards. If she wrote it before, fine. That way she could think in a very clear and logical way. No way Patsy could have wrote that after murdering her daughter. That's for sure. Whether or not the note was written in this alcove or not, we don't know. But we do know that the ransom note was found on the bottom step of this spiral staircase. From here, it's only a short distance to JonBenet's room. This is JonBenet's bedroom, but the room right next to it is the guest bedroom, and there was a real interesting thing that we found out about this room. This window overlooks the garage and the driveway, and would be a great vantage point for anyone that would want to see if the Ramseys were coming home that night. What's interesting about this room, we did see that some of the drawers in the bathroom right off the bedroom were partially open. Looked like they were out of place. Also in this room, there was found a rope. And we don't know where that rope came from. No one can explain why that rope is in this room.
Other items that have never been traced back to the Ramseys are the cord that JonBenet was bound and strangled with and the duct tape over her mouth. RDI theorists tend to dismiss this by arguing they were probably dumped somewhere like a nearby trash can. It's a good example of how the Ramseys veer between forward-thinking and woefully inept, depending on what suits the argument against them. If taking the time and risk of venturing outside the house to dispose of evidence, why on earth would they not dispose of the pad the ransom note originated from while they were at it? Then there's the question of DNA. It's a question that is, can you believe it, contentious among followers of this case. This video's stance is that while the DNA in this case is, can you believe it, not absolute slam dunk proof of an intruder, it is significant enough to warrant serious consideration. Here's the short version. DNA samples were taken from various points on JonBenet's clothing at the time of her murder. Multiple DNA profiles from unidentified sources were found, which is to be expected. Tiny fragments of DNA transfer innocuously from one person to another all the time. As years went on and technology improved, however, one particular profile came to be of serious interest to intruder theorists. A profile found on both the left and right side of the waistband of JonBenet's long johns. That DNA profile is a match for one that was mixed with 2 drops of JonBenet's blood on her underwear. When we say match, it should be noted that the DNA samples are too minute to extract a precise identity from. But enough markers from each sample are identifiable as to make a coincidental match between 2 different people extremely unlikely. 1 in 6,200 odds within the unrelated American Caucasian population. Bottom line, there is DNA on 2 sides of JonBenet's long johns and in her blood on her underwear that very likely belongs to one person. That person is a male. They are not any member of the Ramsey family. Common objections are, the profile might have been transferred from a factory worker from the company that manufactured the garments. This is difficult to reconcile with the same person winding up on 2 separate garments. It might be an innocuous transfer from a family friend. Possible, but it would be a giant and incredibly unfortunate coincidence for tiny skin cells from such a person to wind up in 2 drops of JonBenet's blood. Also, One analyst of the DNA found on JonBenet's underwear has stated in their opinion the source is probably saliva, which if true would make an innocent explanation even more difficult. The DNA has never been matched to anyone known to the Ramseys. Multiple DNA profiles were discovered, so to argue the DNA is significant is to argue that multiple intruders were likely involved. We've basically already covered this one. The argument is not that any innocuous transfer to JonBenet's clothing is unlikely. The profile found on both sides of her long johns and on her underwear mixed with her blood is the one that may very well be her killer's. All the other profiles found on her may very well be, and most likely are, the result of innocent transfer. Central to the Ramsey case is a debate about a psychopathic, sadistic pedophile who has somehow managed to evade being pinned for one of America's most high-profile crimes for a quarter of a century. RDI theorists maintain this person is a fiction, and his seemingly uncanny ability to escape detection is a dead giveaway to the fact he never existed in the first place. IDI theorists maintain that the DNA profile known as Unidentified Male 1 that currently sits in the FBI's Combined DNA Index System, or CODIS, is the key to proving that this elusive monster is all too real. Perhaps we'll never know. Or perhaps one day, a person who for so many years never found themselves in a position to be run through CODIS will run afoul of the law and be forced to submit to a buccal swab. Then suddenly, in an instant, this seemingly impossibly complex case will be solved, with all of its countless perplexing details appearing in hindsight to have always been simple, as the picture of what really happened finally emerges. It sounds almost like a fairy tale ending, but if the Ramsey case illustrates one thing, it's that reality can sometimes be stranger than fiction. While this video has been a long one, truth be told, it's also been about as brief as a video on the Ramsey case can be while giving all sides a fair shake. It's been by no means an exhaustive airing of every piece of information and theory that's been put forward. No video, or even book, could do that, and even if one could, unfortunately it would not serve to offer clarity. For the most part, in fact, quite the opposite. It is the quintessential example of a case where no scenario seems to fit perfectly with the facts or even basic logic, yet some variant of one of those scenarios must be true. Either one or more of JonBenet's family members were in some way involved with her death, or they weren't. A straightforward answer A or answer B proposition on its face, yet no matter what answer you give, you're going to have serious challenges to address. There are very few assertions or inferences within this video that aren't open to valid critique, and such critiques will surely be coming. The reason the case is so frustrating comes back to how there is just so little within it that we really know for sure. There are all kinds of facts we know. Item A was found here. Person B said or did this. The hows and the whys, however, are so often left entirely in the realm of speculation. What makes things even more frustrating still is the knowledge that whatever did happen that night almost certainly is simple. If we had a magical movie screen that could show us exactly what happened, most likely what we would see would make dozens of puzzle pieces come together instantly and render dozens of others as having been totally irrelevant all along. But we don't have a magical movie screen, so we're left in the dark. That being the case, we'll finish today's video, as we sometimes do, in a similar way to how we started it, by going over some things that we do know for sure. JonBenet Ramsey was a 6-year-old girl who loved colouring, ceramics, bicycling and monkey bars. In a report card, her art teacher described her as talented and a caregiver to other students. Her music teacher wrote that she loved to dance and sing, and that she always made sure that each student got their turn. JonBenet has been described invariably by all who knew her as being as outgoing and energetic as she was considerate and kind. All children are special, but when you read about JonBenet Ramsey, you genuinely do get the picture of a little girl who could have grown up to be anything she wanted to be. To say that she deserved more than to become known as the victim of one of the most infamous crimes of the 20th century would be the understatement of the 21st. Today she would have been 31 years old, contributing to the world whatever she saw fit to, and there's no reason to doubt whatever those things would have been would be great. But no one will ever get to see any of that, because 25 years ago, JonBenet Ramsey was killed in the one place she should have been safest. It never should have happened, and there's nothing anyone can do to take it back. This much we know for sure.